Tonight, Selena Kyle hits the epitome of egotism by making out with Catwoman. Guy Gardner fights a baby, I will not elaborate on that one, and Aquaman finally meets up with his mother and realizes he has a lot more mommy issues than he'd like to admit. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 182 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and I'm going to keep this intro pretty brief, all things considered, not because I think I'm going wildly over on time, though I'm sure I am, but mainly because I just don't have much to say. It is a nothing kind of day today. I feel like I've wasted away the past 3 days of my life, the weekend, yesterday, and today. It's just, yeah, everything sucks. Anyway. I know it's not let's look back on this positively. Let's view it for a good life. But sometimes you just have a period where it's like, can we just move on? Can we just get to the next part of things so I don't have to do this? Anyway, comics. 16 of them. Let's start getting through them. We've got, in no particular order here, Batman, Arkham Manor, Catwoman, Gotham Academy, Gotham by Midnight, Red Lantern, Sinestro, Aquaman, The Flash, Secret Origins, Deathstroke, G.I. Zombie, Justice League Dark, and our 3 weeklies, Batman Eternal, Future's End, and World's End. So nothing major going on in there. Batman is, of course, part of Endgame. If you haven't been listening to Red Lanterns, I highly suggest tuning into at least this issue. It's not going to be good, but you need to see what happens. Beyond that, yeah, not much really going on there. So, Batman. Batman number 39, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. So last issue we had the whole backstory of everything, where apparently Joker is immortal, and everything's going to hell and nothing is good, and it ended with Batman going to talk to the Court of Owls because, they're part of Gotham's history. So we open up this issue with a story from Batman saying that he knows that his enemies have all made a pact that the day that he finally dies, they're going to gather together and light the bat signal upside down to signal that the bat is dead. How you justify which side is right side up or upside down against cloud cover, beneath me. So he's like, yeah, that's a thing. Just put that in your pocket for later. So we get to the Court of Owls talking to him. And he's like, oh, Batman, you've fallen right into our labyrinth. And he's like, shut it. I'm not here for that. You know that I just let you guys stick around. You're not even a problem. He's like, you shut up. You don't even know what we do. We're Court of Owls. We do crazy cool things, right, guys? And he's just like, yeah, whatever. Okay. So he basically says, I know that you guys, as Court of Owls in general, are old enough to know about the Dionysium, about the stuff that's power in Joker. You have it, don't you? And they're like, I mean, kind of. The Electrum, the stuff that makes our talons immortal, is a weaker form of Dionysium. But, yeah, the purest of the pure, that's only in the Joker's blood. And he's like, okay, well, the Joker's burning the city to the ground. You cool with that, Mr. Moving in the Shadows of Gotham? And they point up to the ceiling and show a model Gotham City. And they're like, oh, you see, we build it upside down because that shows that we are always under Gotham, working beneath it. And Batman just gets pissed off, throws a batarang, and the whole thing topples down to the ground. He's like, screw that, I'm out. As he goes to leave, he knows a Talon's going to come after him, so one jumps out, and it's a really, really old-looking one, 1600s, and it's swinging a scythe at him, and he's like, hey, look, I know that you're one of the first Talons, Uriah. You were here when Gotham began. Was he here? And Uriah's like, I'm sorry, who? Who are we talking about here? He's like, the Joker, the Pale Man, whatever he went by. Was he around? And we don't get an answer to that. But we then cut later on, which is technically now, because that was a flashback, to Batman wearing a gas mask, fighting his way through Gotham City. And I love, this is the one bit of the narration of Scott Snyder going into Batman's psyche I really like here, where he says, as Batman, I have to pretend I'm immortal. Like, I have to pretend I cannot die, because that's like the first thing ever. The last time I thought I was going to die was when I was 10 years old in an alley. Like, that was it. And it wasn't like, you know, the general gist of it. It was the moment that the gun was aimed at me, because it was moving around between all three of us. But then when everything was said and done, my parents were dead and I was left alive, and I just didn't know what to do after that. I wished that I was dead at that point, and I love that. It's a nice little insert here. So we see he's talking to Julia, and Julia's just like, oh, it's getting awful out there. And he's like, yeah, it's awful everywhere. And then the payback to the fact that Joker was swimming somewhere last issue. Turns out he was swimming into the Batcave through the river. And as he goes up, he looks at all the trophies, and he sees the playing card and the Red Hood mask, and he's like, oh, you kept it. And then Alfred comes out of nowhere behind him with a shotgun and blows Joker's ear off. And he's like, oh, you may have made it past the fences, but you ain't making it past me. So at that point, Joker disappears into shadows, and he says, like, oh, Alfred, I watched your plays. You were such a good person in King Lear. And he's just doing this stealthy thing, hiding in the shadows, until finally he gets the drop on Alfred and cuts off his hand. And so Alfred is now not able to fight back, as Joker's like, oh, I'm gonna get the show on the road. So Batman gets the news from Julia. Julia's like, yeah, he made it into a safe room. I locked it down. He's fine. He's stable. But, like, that's messed up. But also, why was Joker in the cave? What did he want? He wasn't stealing any weapons, because those are all guarded by failsafes. So what's up? And then all of a sudden, we cut to Main Street in Gotham, where he's doing a whole circus parade thing with all of the trophies as the parade float. So he's got, like, the giant dinosaur, he's got the penny, he's got the Joker card, and he's like, hey, all of Gotham, live like you're gonna die, because guess what? You definitely are. And he's using wordplay, according to Batman, to taunt Batman into coming and trying to steal the serum from his spine. And we see, once again, a flash forward to now, Batman's fighting alongside Red Hood, Batgirl, and Bluebird against all these Jokerized zombie people. Cut back one more time to him explaining the plan to them, saying, hey, I need you guys to help me. Here's some gas masks. We're going to go, and we're going to get the serum out of Joker's spine. It's literally the only plan I got, and it is a bad one. And Bluebird points out, hey, wait a minute, you got like a dozen masks in here. There's only 5 of us. What's up? And out comes the Rogues Gallery. Penguin, Scarecrow, Killer Croc, Bane, Clayface, Mr. Freeze, and Poison Ivy. And they're like, you lit the bat signal upside down. And we see that he did. And he's like, that was the symbol of you being dead. So we all came together, and you're still here. So what's up? You want to fight? Let's do it. And he's like, no, I don't want to fight. Joker's out there tearing apart the city. You guys know that he is just the worst. I need you all to help me take him out for the sake of Gotham, because Gotham is all of us, blah, blah. You get the gist of it. Fight for your own city, even if we're on opposite sides. And Batman convinces them. And so we cut to now. We see that all of them are fighting against the Joker zombies, while Joker watches on through a pair of binoculars and says, oh, yes, perfect. And now, friends for my best trick of all. To be concluded next issue. It's a very fast one. It's a very fast read, all things considered. It's not bad by any means. It's just a kind of an interstitial chapter. Like, last issue was all the explanation, and then this issue is like, okay, now we're building to the final fight. And the final fight will be its own thing. You know, it'll go its own way. This one just kind of felt like we're upping the stakes a little. We're showing that this is it. This is the final end game sort of thing going on. So, yeah, it's not bad for what it is, but it is just a very fast read. Overall, I'm going to say it's I think I'm going to say 7. It's just not hitting that 7.5 for me. I can't explain why. Maybe I just was wanting a little bit of extra here, but yeah, 7 for this. Arkham Manor number 5, written by Gerry, Duggan, art by Shawn, Crystal. So last issue, Bruce fought against Clownface, a Joker Clayface hybrid, and then also just went to the walls to fight against this killer who's been in Arkham all this time. So we open up with one of the doctors basically saying, look, we may need to evacuate. There's a killer in here. As much as I hate Batman for what he is, he's trying to help, so we might need to be able to get out of here. And we see one of the inmates, I think we've been introduced to him before, named Meek. He's the one in Joker's cell. he goes over, reaches under his pillow, and seems that there is a Joker card left for him. And he starts freaking out. He's like, let me out of here. He knows I'm in his cell. Please, for the love of God, I can't be. He's going to do something. And the doctor's like, screw him, whatever. So we see that he drops the card outside the cells. Batman's just like, look, I have to fight for this manor. These walls most hold, and it's going to be over my dead body if they finally fall. So we see him get into a fight against this person in the walls, this whoever it may be. It's still left up to be a mystery. But honestly, most of this issue is just an extended fight scene where Batman's like, he's strong. He doesn't fight like anyone I've ever fought before, so he's a little bit unpredictable, but ultimately, I'm still Batman. But he is taking punches very well, so it is an issue here. But finally, he does get him on the ropes, and he grabs the dude and literally punches him through a wall. And he's like, it's important that I show the inmates of Arkham that I am willing to fight for them too. That nobody can come in here and just kill the crazies just because they're the crazies. This is important for me. And we see that he's also saying, and I'm also not going to let him kill him in my own damn house. So he knocks this guy out into the snow. And he's like, who are you? Talk, tell me now. And this guy just looks up and bites his own tongue off, and it falls into the snow as Batman's like, this guy, no name, no gimmick, he's just a maniac who likes to murder. That's all special about him. And as it falls off into the snow, Mr. Freeze steps in, and he's like, oh yeah, he's gonna fit in here just fine. And Batman's like, not now, man. So he gets all inboarded, he's wrapped up, straitjacket chains and all that, and they're basically just doing the Joker bit from Dark Knight where it's like, well, we got nothing on him. He's no fingerprints, no names, nothing in his pockets but knives and lint. And Batman's like, yeah, look, this guy was working on the manor as we were transitioning it from Wayne Manor into Arkham Manor. And then one day he theoretically quit and disappeared, but it turns out he didn't. He just moved into the walls, and he's been here the whole time. So we'll figure out who he is. We'll find something from his DNA. We just got to give it time. Trust the system. And the one doctor guy's like, hey, Batman, he does the end of Dark Knight. I never said thank you. He's like, you don't have to. He's like, yes, I do. Thank you, Batman. And he says there's 4 people who escaped inmate-wise. Jack Shaw, a.k.a. Bruce, Mr. Freeze, Sybil Silverlock, and Seth Wickham. And Batman's like, well, look, I wouldn't worry about Jack Shaw. He'll show up sooner or later. Seth Wickham, I can go take care of him right now. And Seth Wickham was the guy who, this whole story opened up with. He was sent away for trying to kill his parents, I think. But we see the doctor's more concerned about, what about Mr. Freeze? He's just out there. He's doing whatever. And then a snowball hits the Batmobile's window. And Mr. Freeze is just having a fun time out here in the snow. And Batman's like, yeah, look, the fridge went out. It's too warm for him in there. Consider him on work release. Give him a shovel. Tell him to start or start shoveling. So Batman puts in an autopilot to get to Seth Wickham's last known address, his parents' house. And he's like, this kid isn't a career criminal. I know where he's going to go first. He's going to go home, but I'm picking the lock, and I can already smell it through the door. I'm too late. And we see a bloody knife and a shattered picture frame of him with his parents. So seems like Seth just went one step too far there. I'm not sure what the last issue is going to be. On one hand, if we just go about collecting Seth, it kind of feels like that wasn't set up for the rest of the series. But on the other hand, we caught the killer. That plot is done. So really anything that they do at this point feels like it hasn't been set up properly. I don't know what more we can do, but I guess we'll see. Maybe it'll just be kind of a little throwaway, oh yeah, that happens. I think there's actually, now that I think about it, I think there's an Endgame tie-in for Arkham Manor. That might be next month as well. So, yeah, no, we'll get there when we get there. For this particular issue, like I said, it's mostly just an extended fight scene. It's not bad by any means. They have some fun with the layouts, but overall, it is still just kind of a very fast read. So I think overall, it's probably just going to get probably a 6.5 for me. It's okay, not great, just doing what it's doing and always has been. Catwoman number 39, written by Genevieve Valentine, art by Garry Brown. So last issue, I mean, it's just been more of the same. A lot more has been going on. What I didn't notice last issue was that the person that saved Selina from accidentally walking into traffic was Mason, the guy who's been working with Black Mask, and he claimed that he is her brother. I just didn't pick up on that art wise. I missed it. So that happened. This issue picks up, and we see that the battle lines are being drawn between Black Mask Group and the Calabreses. Black Mask has bought up a lot of property all around the docks. Selina and everyone around her knows war is being built up here. Everything's going on. And she's still trying to figure out, like, what did it mean when he said brother? I'm keeping that to myself, but, like, I'm very concerned over it. So they're apparently allowed to buy up all these neighborhoods because they're doing it under the guise of public service, safe, low-rent housing, stuff like that. And she's like, okay, let's make massive donations to all these things that, like, Gothamites love, the free clinic, the art museum, stuff like that. Like, we need to make sure that we stay in the public eye and are not muscled out here. So then we see Black Mask is talking to his little cadre of people representing certain families, not the heads, but the people who are sent to speak on behalf of the heads. And basically he's like, look, we can get rid of her. It won't be a problem. Like, let's just go ahead and do it. And they're concerned, like, oh, you might make a martyr out of her. It's like, it's only a martyr if she's remembered. Let's do it before that happens. So they take a vote, all's in favor, and so we see one of the guys leaving named Forster Lane, who I think called the cops last issue, or at least tried to do something like that. He calls in and reports an attempted murder on Selina Kyle that hasn't happened yet. So we see, because of the donations and stuff like that to the art museum, both Selina and Mason are being, like, recognized in front of this big press conference crowd, including Bruce Wayne being out in the crowd. And as they're doing the thing of, like, oh, generous contributions, blah, 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 dude pulls a gun, and Bruce yells out, get down, look out. Everyone ducks. Everyone manages to hide. Mason seems genuinely, like, upset by this. He's like, no, no. And the guy who pulled the gun starts to get away. We see Catwoman, not Selina, Catwoman, jumps off some roofs, manages to get to the guy, and before the cops can arrive, / Selina's people, it turns out that the dude is dead and a gunshot went off. Catwoman nowhere to be found. And they say, like, wait a minute, hold on, that's a Falcone guy. They're supposed to be with the Calabreses, but they almost shot Selina. Guess that shows where their allegiance lies. So we see a whole thing of Selina and Ward saying, look, we'll have to declare war. We can't let this insult stand. And Selina's like, look, I just have someone I need to go see before any of this goes down. And she meets up with... I think it's Natalia. I don't know, whatever her name is. The one girl that's working for her. And it's basically like, you're fired because this is going to get messy as this all goes down. And I don't think that both of us are going to be able to make it out alive if we both stay in this. So you're out. So we see she goes and meets up with Mason and is like, okay, why'd you just try to have me killed there, man? And he's like, that's not what I wanted. That wasn't me. I promise you. And she's like, okay, well, yeah, that's pretty bad decision for a brother there if you really are my brother. And he's like, look, hurting you was never part of my plan. She's like, okay, what was your plan? And he's like, I expected you to realize the futility of things and then you'd make a deal because you didn't want there to be any bloodshed. You'd make a deal, you'd give Black Mask a seat back at the table, you'd have to give up your own rights as head of the family, and then me, Mason, also being a member of the family, would then be able to take your place. So I'd make out good, Black Mask would get what he wants, and then I'll require you to step down, and no bloodshed would have happened. And she's like, sounds like a pretty good plan, except for the whole part where I had to go kill that one dude who was talking to the cops. He was the one who really believed in second chances. Too bad for you. And so Selina gets up and steps out. We see that Black Mask gets visited by the cops. They believe he's connected to the shooting or the attempted murder of Selina, probably from Forster Lane. And so he's escorted out in cuffs. We then see that the cops who made the arrest are immediately brought before their superior, who basically says, who the hell did that? And it's Keyes and, I believe, Alvarez. And it's like, drop it. Just drop it. He's got a lawyer showing up. Don't ask him any questions. Let him go. Case is closed. Goodbye now. So they go. They sit back on desk duty. we then see that the Hasegawa girl, I believe it's Eiko, she comes to visit Selina, and she's like, hey, can we speak alone? And she's like, you do know that your family, the Hasegawas, are on Black Mask side, and you would make an excellent hostage to take. And she's like, are you going to take me hostage? And she's like, no, I don't think I will, but I could. So basically she said, Selina asks, did you know about the assassination ahead of time? She's like, do you really want me to answer that? She's like, no, not really, but doesn't make a difference. So she tells Eiko to get out of here before she does decide to take her as a hostage. And Ward is even like, she would have made a good hostage, And she's like, yeah, don't worry about it. So Selina points out, what happens if I give in and I do make the deal that Mason's talking about? And he's like, well, the Calabrese family is going to fall into obscurity and we're never going to be able to get a seat at the table again. And she's like, and what happens if we fight it out? And he's like, well, Gotham's going to burn. So we see Forster is actually talking to Eiko as she is Catwoman, and Eiko's saying like, hey, look, I want to protect you, but you need to give me information as to like, who else are you working for? Because clearly you're not just working for your own interests here. And he's like, that's a next issue reveal, buddy. That's not a now thing. So not going to happen. She's like, well, I can't protect you if I don't know where you're going to be. So she leaves Forster behind. We then see Eiko is sent by her father to go and get some information on Selina, whatever that means. And she says, yes, father. And so Eiko goes dressed as Catwoman, meets Selina out on the balcony, and Selina's like, seriously, I could kidnap you at any time. I want you to understand that. And she says, they're going to declare war on you. They think that you turned in Black Mask. They think that you're the one who's responsible. And she's like, yeah, I know. And Eiko says, be careful. And Selina kisses her. To which point Eiko's like, was that for me or for the suit I'm wearing? And she's like, I don't know yet. Hopefully we'll have time to find out. So we then see Black Mask after he gets out of prison. Is like, okay, whoever we own at the precinct, make sure this can't happen again. And everyone's like, well, he didn't know until it was too late. But then Black Mask is like, well, someone lost the evidence. Who was that? In walks Penguin, who says, wank, wank, I can make a lot of stuff happen. You should be happy to see me because I'm going to be the one that solves all your problems. So we then see a Falcone guy shows up to Selina, says like, we had no idea this guy was talking to Black Mask. We're totally on your side. And she's like, yeah, totally. Hey, grab him, handcuff him. We're going to hold him as the hostage as we talk to the Falcones here. So at that point, the battle lines are drawn. We're all getting ready to go here. And she's saying that basically what needs to happen is Mason and her need to negotiate directly. That's the only way that this is going to end here, or else Gotham is going to burn. So yeah, in depth. I will say this is better than the last issue was in terms of understanding what was happening. I think the last issue just got a little bit too in the weeds. It's just a bit messier. Probably would be better to read it as a trade, but that's not how I'm reading it. So yeah, I think this one it's good. It's setting up clear, decisive lines of where everybody's standing while still leaving a little bit of blurriness, those little trump cards that can flip over and say, oh, now the tide has turned again. So I don't know how I feel about Mason actually being a brother. That just seems a little to me, but it could just, it'd probably be like a half-brother sort of situation, like the Leo Rex, he had a whole bunch of kids. It wouldn't be that surprising to say a few illegitimate ones came through. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know how I feel about it entirely. But overall, this one was very well done. I'm thinking 7.5 on that. Gotham Academy number 5, written by Becky, Cloonan, and Brenden, Fletcher, art by Karl, Kerschl. So last issue we wrapped up with them finding out that something has been living in the walls of the Academy, and it turns out it's Killer Croc, to which Olive says, tell me about my mother. So we see that, they basically introduce themselves, and he's like, yeah, my name's Croc. I knew your mom. She was in the cell across from mine, and when the building collapsed, I promised her that I'd look out for you. And Olive's surprised. She's like, oh, she remembers me? And he's like, yeah, no, totally. And all of a sudden, Maps is calling out down the halls, being like, hey, man, this is crazy. This is great. And Croc's like, I can't be seen here. Nobody can know who I am. They'll also send me back to Arkham. So he runs away, and she's like, no, you come back. I need to know more. So Olive gives chase, ends up bumping into Maps, and Maps is like, I just saw a giant lizard man. that's crazy, right? And she's like, yeah, but he's a friend, so we're going to need to figure out what's going on here. So they keep on going down the path that they saw him go down. Eventually, as they make their way into this crossroads room, there's like 7 different exits and a giant rune on the ground. And we see that Maps is like checking her compass, but then Olive hears some noises coming down one of the hallways, says, that's the way to go, hurry. So they run down. However, according to them, Croc has caved in the tunnel behind them, so there's no way that they're going to be able to make it through. But Maps, she's keeping track of things. She's like, wait a minute, this is the North Hall. Like, we could just go in through the other North Hall. Like, it shouldn't be an issue. And she's like, oh, but we can't move all these boulders. And she's like, no, we got people who can help us. Don't worry, let's go get cleaned up. So they go back up to Olive's room. Her roommate is trying on a dress and saying like, oh yeah, the dance is tomorrow night. Who are you going to be taking? I heard that you've been out with that Tristan guy, which means that you and Kyle are officially on split, right? And Maps like gets a little bit pouty and walks out of the room. And I was just like, oh, wait, I'm sorry. And Maps like, tomorrow, 1900 hours, my room. And we see that Maps has invited Pommeline and I think it's Colton. And is Pommeline's like, oh man, it wasn't a ghost, it was just a giant crocodile Arkham escapee. That's so sad. And Colton's like, yeah, clearly that's not the weirder thing. So Colton says he'll help as long as he can get his bag of tricks that was confiscated back in like issue 2 or whatever. And she's like, yeah, all right, we can do that. But then in walks Kyle, and Kyle has apparently heard, because they've got a map of the North Hall on the floor, he puts 2 and 2 together and is like, were you the one who like was leading my sister into the North Hall? Like, how could you do something so dangerous? And I was like, hey, you want to go to the dance together? And he's like, yeah, totally. And Maps is just like, hooray! So cut to the night of the dance. They go there and they're like, okay, we're going to have to ditch our dates at whatever predetermined time, and we'll get it all taken care of. So as they're there, they're enjoying themselves. We see Colton gives the cue for this kid Warren to come up and tell Kyle, hey, Professor wants to see you. Go check on that. Sounds urgent. So then Colton gives him a bag of fireworks and says, don't burn them all in one place, as the rest of the crew goes on their way. And Olive feels bad for ditching Kyle, but ultimately it's something she knows need to be done. So they go to the headmaster's office to help Colton get his bag of tricks. And there is a riddle lock, as they call it, on the door. It's a bunch of runes in like, it's the thing from Da Vinci Code. You know what I'm talking about. So at that point, it's like, look, we're never going to be able to get in. It's impossible to break one of these things. And Maps is like, hold on, this is my specialty. And she just does it, like first try, no problems. And she's like, what? I'm good at puzzles. So they go in. Colton gets his bag of tricks. And as they do so, Maps pulls out a crossbow and says, here, Olive, you could take this. And I was like, what? I don't want. And I was just like, shh, just take it. So they go out. They're ready to go get to Croc. They want to bring him a snack as well. And then all of a sudden, Olive sees a bat shadow up in the sky, a giant bat. And she's like, And she pulls out the crossbow and shoots it and takes down this giant bat. And she's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And as she goes up, it's not Batman. It's not even Man-Bat. It's Tristan. It's the good-looking kid who's a Man-Bat, effectively. And he's like, don't look at me, not while I'm like this. And she's like, oh, I hurt you. I'm so sorry. And she like tries to treat the arrow a little bit. And the guy, Tristan's basically like, yeah, I've got the Langstrom virus. I've got a werewolf Man-Bat thing going on. They sent me to this school while they were looking for a cure for me, but then that one night I saw you wander into the North Hall, and then all of a sudden it was up in flames, so I flew over to go in and rescue you, and like I saw you in the fire, and it's like the fire was alive, like it was trying to consume you. It was crazy. And then once the building started giving way, I brought you out. And the professors wanted me to keep an eye on you because they thought, and then all of a sudden there's a sound. Someone's coming. Once again, Maps ruining the moment. So Tristan flies off, and Olive doesn't let in on what actually just happened there. She's like, oh yeah, thanks Maps, I'll be all right. So we see them using Colton's bag of tricks to break through the rubble to get into the North Hall. Croc's just standing there like letting it happen. He's about to go run away when all of a sudden Olive comes out with a giant leg of like lamb and is like, hey, we brought you food. And he's like, okay, cool. So they sit down, they start chatting. Croc is just regaling stories of fighting Batman. He's like, and then I throw a rock at him. Right? So at that point, Map says, hey, do you have a map of the halls? We could really use it. And he's like, no map. I came from the old tunnels that connect this place to Arkham. Your mom was the one who told me that they were both connected to begin with. And she's like, what did my mom know about all this? And she's like, oh, a lot of things. She said this boarded up old building was the first place I found. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of tiny little smoke balls roll into the room and they explode out, and Croc goes, oh no, as Batman appears. So yeah, it's good. I don't want to bury the lead there. It is a solid issue. I think I like the way that they are explaining everything. They're going through, say, okay, what's up with Tristan? Man-Bat thing. What's up with Croc? He's connected to the mom. What I like about this issue the most is the first half, where it is this, okay, we got to give chase to Croc and do all that. Something I've noticed about this series is that they will set up a problem, come up with the plan to fix it, execute the entire plan, and then the issue ends with a totally separate problem. And I guess I just kind of prefer a bit of a slower burn. Like, you set up the problem, you make the plan to fix it, and then the issue ends with like a hiccup in the plan, something that like goes wrong. But this is something where we get done the entire plot point of go and get into the North Hall to find Croc. And then we get the extra problem of Batman shows up on the very end. Like, it's a complete resolution here before we even get to the end of the issue. And I'm not saying that's a wrong way of doing things. It's just not the way that I prefer it to be done. It makes it feel very rushed to me. But it is good. It is still, I recognize the quality of the storytelling here, and like more so the characterizations. I think that's what people really enjoy about it, and I do too. So I'm going to say this one is still a solid 7 and move on from there. Gotham by Midnight, number 4, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Ben Templesmith. So last issue, we did a whole thing where smallpox was being delivered by a demon inside of the shadow of a girl. It's a whole thing. This issue, significantly faster paced, to the point where I'm not sure I even fully understood what's happening. So we open at a bar, and it's Corrigan and the internal affairs officer, Sergeant Rook, who's just drinking at the bar. Corrigan makes the point of saying that, like, some guys were yelling and fighting at each other. They stumbled out of the bar. It's not my problem. People are going to do what they're going to do. And then we see the people who stumbled outside the bar, like, stab each other. So kind of this dark little moment there as Sergeant Rook is like, oh, thank God they finally shut up. It sounds like they were going to kill each other. So basically, Corrigan, they're down and drinks together, shot after shot. And he's like, look, Rook, we can be friends. Even if you want to take down my department, I get that. I understand that. But, like, we can still be friends. And he's like, nah, we really can't, though. And then all of a sudden, as they're ordering another drink, they look down the bar and see, I don't even know the best way to describe it, a sandworm, but, like, the size of your forearm coming out of this dude's head with a bunch of, like, black tendrils. And it's saying the same demonic speech as before. And it reaches out for Corrigan. We then see those dead guys from outside. They've got little, like, tendrils coming out of their eyes as well, as the one doctor character and Drake come up. And it's Dr. Tar, that's what it is. And they're looking at these guys like, is this our department? Like, he's dead, but is it, like, supernaturally spooky dead? And as they look at him, all of a sudden there's an insect that jumps off his body. And Tar is like, oh, the insect, don't let it get away. And so Drake just stomps on it with her boot and is like, okay, well, that's not exactly what I meant. And then all of a sudden it starts sprouting these tendrils as well that start going after Drake. So they jump back in the car as quickly as humanly possible. Meanwhile, inside the bar, Corrigan's fighting off the tendrils, just like, I'm not so easy to take down as you would think. But then he looks over at Rook, who's already been, like, completely taken out. And this is the part that I think is a little bit hard to tell is what's going on. According to Corrigan, this demon is killing them via alcohol poisoning. Like, it's literally getting them so drunk they die. So he takes the tendril as it's like yelling out speech and whatever, and he's like, "Oh, did you come for me after I took out your buddies, Ovovo in the swamp and Icked at the hospital?" And we see him calling up Tar as the thing starts, speaking out in this demon tongue, and Tar is like, "Hey, Corrigan, we got some crazy stuff going on here. You gotta come out and help us." And he's like, "Yeah, no, I got my own thing here." And he holds the phone up to the thing, and it's like, "Yeah," and it's trying to poison us with alcohol. You know what's going on there? Meanwhile, out on the streets as Drake is driving, it's car crashes, it's madness, like everything is just super chaotic there. And so they're forced to drive through the worst of it in order to get away from whatever the hell's going on here. But the entire neighborhood is now being attacked by these tendrils. And Corrigan, as he's on the phone, they're asking, like, "What do we do?" He's like, "Get as far away as you can. I feel that judgment is coming." And we see his fists start to light up, and soon his whole entire body's going at it. And Tar's like, "What do you mean judgment's coming? What does that mean?" And then all of a sudden he lights up, and we finally get the first reveal, full page of the Spectre coming out. And the Spectre looks at the demon thing and just being like, "You're a foul creature, and you will be extinguished, for I am the Spectre. I am Heaven's Blade. I am the Storm, and you are an abomination." So it does the whole holier-than-thou thing. It, like, grabs the throat of the sandworm and just, like, crunches it in his hand. But we see, of course, that's not enough because it's infected the whole neighborhood. So all of a sudden, this light starts expanding out from the bar, and Tar looks back. He's like, "Oh, my God, it's divine judgment. What the hell?" And so he's still on the phone with Corrigan, like, as much as he knows, Corrigan's not answering. And he's like, "Look, we've been deciphering the language. That thing it was asking was saying Ada Gotham. That's a question. It's asking what is Gotham. Like, it's asking if you know what it is." So we see Spectre starts raising up. He starts growing to like kaiju size as he starts wiping out pieces of the city here. We see the bat signal goes up in the air. As Tar explains, "Look, the first one was stealing children, sending them back with a new language, cutting them off from their own like group of people. The second one brought smallpox. Like, that's a whole thing. This one's killing us with alcohol. This is all tied back to Gotham's history in some way." And I swear to God, for a moment, I thought I was going to get a Scott Snyder breakdown of like Gotham's history again, but not so much. We just see a demonic form come out of Slaughter Swamp. And it turns out that the original people here, the founders of Gotham, drove them out, killed them, destroyed them. And their spirits have basically been living on in this swamp ever since. And they are looking for revenge at this point. So as the Spectre is just stomping his way downtown through Gotham, the nun and the remaining detective in the Precinct 13 or whatever look out and they see it. There's like, "All right, well, the Spectre's here. Let's go." And the nun's like, "You knew?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course I knew. What do you think, I'm a schmuck? Yeah, let's go. A lot of people are going to be in trouble." So they hop in the car, ready to go. We see the demon and Spectre are fighting. I believe the bat jet is like flying in between the two of them. Just visually, that's what it looks like, but it might just be the bat signal. I'm not sure. But Tar basically starts freaking out like, "What if we get caught up in the judgment? What happens if we aren't found worthy? Oh God, please stop it before it's too late." And then it just ends with a big explosion in downtown Gotham. So, all right. Look, that took me like 6 minutes to explain what happened. But like, if you're reading it, it barely takes like 3. It is a whole lot of full page spreads, very like showing off the size of the Spectre and like the demon fighting against it and stuff. The narration's pretty light, all things considered. But like, that's not a good thing here. Like, I was confused by a lot of what issue 1 was doing, just because it felt like it was playing with this mystery. This is, by all accounts, an explanation. This is telling me what is going on directly as I'm looking at it. And I still feel like nothing happened. I feel like the big point of this particular issue was, check it out, finally doing the Spectre. But like, it's not enough. You know, it's not enough to fill an issue with that when you've been doing these big demonic things this whole time. So, not to mention, I don't even know what like the Spectre means, you know? Like, yes, theoretically, every woman in a certain distance is going to get killed or sent to judgment or whatever you want to call it. But like, I have no sense of scale here. Is all of downtown Gotham about to be killed? Is that just going to happen? I feel like that's a bit extreme for it to happen in this book, but You tell me. I just got a little bit lost because they were so caught up in the grandeur of it that I don't feel like they were really explaining what was happening here. They were explaining the story with the demons and stuff, but not what was happening in this particular issue. So maybe we'll get some more of that next issue. I don't know. But this one particularly, I can't give it above like a 6. It just felt really lacking to me. So hopefully we can get it up by next time. Red Lantern, number 39, written by Landry Q. Walker, art by Jim Calafiore. So, last issue was Walker's first issue on this book, and it kind of is just picking up from the idea of after Atrocitus did his whole turn Earth's people angry thing, there were consequences. There are pockets of anger around the world. And last issue we dealt with some of that, but this issue opens up with Guy Gardner getting his ass kicked by a baby. And it cuts to earlier as he's like, yeah, that's the whole thing I got to build up to. So he walks in, he sees a whole group of people gathered around, and he's like, oh, excuse me, superhero coming through. And as he gets to the middle, he sees this man who is bloodied and beaten, and sitting on top is this just happy, smiling little baby. And Guy picks him up just like, what the, whose kid is, oh my God. And the kid just like smiles and burps and whatever. And as soon as Guy does a little scan on it to see, like, who is it? What's going on? All of a sudden, this giant red rage monster beast thing shows up behind him. And he's like, it's right behind me, isn't it? And so he turns around. He's like, all right, what the hell are you? And it starts moving forward. He's like, hold on, I got a baby on board. Wait till I drop the kid off, and then you and I can fight. And it roars, and it's like, all right, figures. So he puts up a shield. It crashes right through. Baby almost gets dropped, but he grabs it the last second. Guy that's gets grabbed a few more times as he's threatening the monster, saying, stay away from the kid. Monster punches Guy through a building, but Guy manages to keep the baby in a bubble. And then all of a sudden, the baby just gets rid of the bubble. And he's like, what? My bubble? How? What? And then the monster shows up, grabs Guy, and just starts grinding his face into the pavement. And he's like, stop, or I'm, oh, God. And as he's like about to pass out, the baby is right there next to him. And we see the monster picks up the baby, and he's like, no. And then all of a sudden, he wakes up, and he's in a bed. This old couple's watching over him, just being like, shh, shut up. Don't talk about the kid. Don't mention the kid. And he's like, what? It was a baby. There's a monster out there. We got to go save the baby. And he's just like, no, you don't understand. That baby is the problem. That baby is like entirely no one can help that child. And they say, like, look, most people get killed after they went through what you went through. It's crazy you survived. And he's like, I got a ring that protects me, but like, why am I not angry? I don't feel angry right now. What has happened to me? And we see that he's filled in by the locals. Turns out that this baby's name is Danton Dexter Dibble III. And the family was dead. They were all crushed under rubble. And ever since that baby survived, everyone around it feels less angry. Like the baby is sucking up the anger. However, nothing can control that much rage inside of one living thing. It's got to let it out somehow, unless it has some sort of parasite in it, which is what Guy believes this monster is. It's some parasite that's feeding on rage. So he goes into the house where the baby would be. He goes through some of the belongings, and he steals like a videotape, a DVD of some home movies. And then as he goes back to the nursery, he comes across the baby and the monster, and he tells the monster, like, look, they think that the baby's the problem here, but I know it's you. I've served on the front lines in the War of Light, man. I've seen some crazy stuff. You are nothing. And the monster's like, well, he doesn't say anything, but it just stares him down. And then he's just like, look, there's only one thing this is going to end. You got to let the kid go. And so then the monster goes into the kid, possesses him, and the baby becomes the strongest rage creature on the planet. So it starts attacking Guy with like heat vision and throwing some pretty solid punches at the same time. And Guy's just like, I didn't really think I'd have to fight a baby today, but I got this, as he's punched in the face, punched through a wall, into a car, and he's like, that baby sucker punched me. And then we see the baby's got a school bus that he's throwing down, and he's just ready to fight. And Guy's like, I'm not going to kill a baby. And also, it's getting stronger. Like, the more it's moving through the town, it's absorbing more anger, and it's feeding off my own rage as well. I need to stop it. So he quickly zooms off to an electronics store. The baby gives chase. He puts in the home movie of the baby and his mother, and he's like, I hope this works. And when the movie starts playing, it distracts the baby, and guy's like, I know that you are the angriest baby in all the universe right now, but I'm hoping that you have more in your heart than just rage. And it does feel a tiny bit of compassion, love, whatever it is, towards the mother that it sees on screen, just long enough for Guy to come in and zoop all of the red energy out of the baby and into his own ring. And it's too much for him to bear as well, so he blasts it up into the sky and it all dissipates. So all that rage is gone. So he says, all right, I stuck around in town for a little bit, offering to help them rebuild and also find a place for this baby, but nobody wanted the baby, so guess I've now got a baby. And we see him walking down the street with a little carrier on his back, just bringing this baby wherever it is he is going to go next, which is the last issue, next issue. So, not an extended adventure going on there. It's a weird couple issues, man. I don't know what the next issue is going to be. I mean, it might not even be Landry Q. Walker. It is. But it's just a strange little collection here of, I didn't expect to pick up on this story arc of like him having to go across the country and like fix pockets of rage, and then like the ways that they manifest being weird within their own right. It's not bad in concept, but it's a weird execution, where the last one was very, I don't want to say strangely written, but unconventionally written. This one, it's a super powered baby. That seems just like shock value to get you to get it off the like rack. Just see the cover of the baby punching Guy Gardner and be like, all right, yeah, I have to see how we get there. But no, it's not a bad issue. It's just so weird. So I think overall, I'm probably going to say it's a 6.5. It's not quite at that 7 territory, but like, it's okay. It's just so weird. Sinestro number 10, written by Cullen, Bunn, art by Brad Walker. So last issue, Sinestro attacked Warworld because, I don't know, I can't even remember the reason why, but it was a whole big thing between him and Mongol. And then turns out Mongol has some energy zapping weapons or whatever, and also a team working for him called the Apex League. So Sinestro kind of got outclassed. We then pick up this issue, basically just recapping it. He was seeking revenge against Mongol. The Apex League showed up, and now he's barely got like 5% in his ring. And as Sinestro tackles him to the ground, he's like, oh, look, you struggle against the inevitable. Just give up already. And he's like, oh, who do you think you're dealing with? And then his ring says 3%. And he's like, I yield. But right as he says yield, a little yellow line just zaps its way out into space. And Mongol's like, I accept your surrender. And then zaps him with heat vision until he's unconscious. And the Apex League is like, he surrendered, man. We already won. Why you gotta zap him? And he's like, you don't understand Sinestro. When he says he surrendered, that means he's planning something. I'd rather he be unconscious for that. And they've also got Lyssa Drax, and they're like, hey, they sent something out into space. Should we go figure out what that is? And Lyssa's like, what, you think it's a distress signal? Man, you don't know anything about Sinestro. And immediately Mongol's like, nah, he's sent for Yellow Lanterns. They're all going to show up here, but luckily that's exactly what we want. So we see the beam goes off into space. Meanwhile, on New Korrigar, Soranik is wildly upset because all the new Korrigarians that were brought for them to save are dead. There was nothing they could do. And the other Korrigarians that were there are like, look, we aren't as weak as we were before. We know that there are things out there in the universe. There is pain. There's trials like that. We are stronger and we are able to move on there. We can adapt to hardship. And one of the Korrigarians shows up and says, like, what about Tyrius? And it's like, Tyrius is no longer with us. And she's like, oh God, my son. She starts breaking down. Soranik is like, Arkillo, can you get these bodies out of here? Because, like, I am not doing okay. So as they say that, in comes Sinestro's signal. It goes in between all the Yellow Lanterns, and it's Sinestro just pomp and circumstancing like, Hello, my Yellow Lanterns. Even as we speak, I am launching an attack on Warworld, and now it is your time to show up and help me crush them once and for all. Victory will be ours. And then immediately one of the Yellow Lanterns is like, oh man, he's in trouble. Like, he could dress that up however he wants, but like, he needs our help. So we then cut over to Sinestro, who's in chains and all tied up by Mongols, just like, all right, well, don't pass out yet, Sinestro. I want you awake when your Yellow Lanterns get here and we take the last of your power from you. And he's like, where's Lissa? It's like, I'm not putting Lissa anywhere. I know she's your battery. She's elsewhere. Don't worry about it. But yeah, you're not going to be able to do whatever. Plus, I'm going to make sure she has wonderful stories to tell. So we then see, how does Mongol have this light siphoning technology? It turns out it's a Green Lantern story. Relic, the Lights Out storyline. When Relic got imprisoned in the wall, he left some of his technology behind. Mongol got his hands on it, made some more. But whereas Relic did it just to, like, have it and study it or whatever, Mongol's like, I could do so much more. I could take over the world, it's going to be great. I'm going to do that. And then he looks at Sinestro and he's like, but ultimately what I'm going to do is, I know you've got Parallax inside of you. And if you attack me, I'm going to suck it right out of you. I'm just going to take it and use it for my own, and then I will bend the Sinestro cord to my will. So that's my plan. Bye. And he just walks off. And there's one guy left from the Apex League, and Sinestro's like, I don't want to talk to any of Mongol's underlings. And he's like, I am not a minion of Mongol. I am Venomous Shade of the Apex League. And he's like, yeah, whatever you got to tell yourself, bootlicker. And he's like, hey, no, Mongol is helping us fight against the Paling. And Sinestro's like, oh yeah, Paling, I've heard about them. And then Venomous Shade gives the whole backstory on the Paling of like, yes, the Apex League, we all came from different planets who were destroyed by their Church of the Emptiness, and now we must take them out so before they can do it to the rest of civilization. And Sinestro's like, bro, I don't care about your backstory, but you should know that Mongol is 100% using you, and he does not give a damn about your tragic backstory. And he's like, what am I supposed to believe you? You're literally Sinestro. Or like, are you a hero now? And he's like, no. Mongol lies to you, but I am absolutely a villain here. So cue the Yellow Lantern Corps arriving on Warworld. They start attacking. It's a whole big thing. They know nothing about Mongols draining technology or anything like that, but they show up to fight, knowing that it's a losing battle anyway because Sinestro demands it. So Sornik and a B team come in. They break in to try to rescue Sinestro, and it's Raijin, who's like, oh, we'll slaughter anyone in our way. And as they make their way down the thing, Venomous Shade is like, oh, a battle's broken out, but you realize you cannot win. Like, Mongol is prepared for them. He's going to be able to take them all on. And Sinestro's like, oh, I know, but he's not going to do it immediately. Mongol's going to see if he can beat him on his own power, and then he's going to, like, take away all their powers when he's done with that. But that's going to give me just enough time for the second message I sent out, because I didn't send out one just to my Yellow Lantern Corps. In comes from a boom tube Becca of the New Gods, dressed in Yellow Lantern gear, ready to join the fight. I'm glad they brought that storyline back. Here I thought it was just going to be like a little throwaway, oh, maybe eventually, but it seems like the right time. This seems like a good time to bring this in and say, like, yep, Sinestro needs help, and then Becca comes in and does it. It's good. It's a nice little, I wouldn't even say cliffhanger, because it's just the story hook. It's exactly where I would want it to go. So, yeah, it's a good issue within its own right. It's a lot of explanations of, like, oh, you can't trust Mongol, and here's how Mongol has the tech, and da-da-da. But ultimately, it forwards the story enough within its own right that I think that it is a solid issue. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, and here's hoping that Becca's not just going to be like a, well, tried that out, wasn't a fan, moving on. Aquaman number 39, written by Jeff Parker, art by Paul Pelletier. So last issue, Aquaman finally made his way through the final portals, blah, 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 and he came face to face with his mother, who seems to be a warlord queen of this strange new island. So we immediately see Aquaman just be like, are you Atlanta, Queen of Atlantis? And just like, I'm not hiding. Yeah, that's who I am. You clearly are a Lord of Atlantis who has come for me. And this is my world now, bitches. So you better stand back. And she readies her entire war guard behind her as they all start firing off like flaming harpoons. Mara throws up a water shield and they're like, water control, that's Zebellian stuff. Have the Zebels gone back to Atlantis? And immediately Atlanta's just like, oh, have they come here to absorb our culture as well? And immediately Bear's just like, I'm going in for the fight. And she's like, whoa, look, she doesn't know me. She's afraid. She's on guard. And Mara's like, well, she looks great, by the way. I just wanted to say, she was fantastic looking. So at that point, Aquaman charges in, and this big guy named Gantu steps up, just being like, stay away from Queen. And he's like, no, I have to talk to her. So he punches her in the face, or punches Gantu in the face, and immediately everyone's just like, no one can beat Gantu. That's ridiculous. So Aquaman just yells up, like, I don't want to fight. I just want to talk to you. I've waited my whole life for this. Please, just hear me out. And they spawn up a whole, like, water wall just to stop anyone else from getting in. And Land's like, what do you mean you've waited your whole life? And he's like, I'm from your past. I couldn't remember you, but I hoped I would find you one day. I grew up in a lighthouse on Amnesty Bay. My father was Tom Curry, and I am Arthur. I am your son. And she looks, and she's like got a moment of like hope in her face, and then she goes, lies, and blasts him with her spear, and that knocks out Mara as well. The water wall is gone. And she explains, my son and surface husband are dead. They were killed by, what's his name? The guy, Orvax, who was boasting of it, trying to court her into marriage or whatever. And that was the day when she boasted of it one too many times, where she finally killed him. So she's like, yep, I accepted their deaths long ago. I've never forgiven the Atlanteans because of it, and therefore I recognize that you are just using my tragedy to take over my realm. Let's sacrifice him to the volcano. So they start walking up the volcano, being held by Gantu, and she basically gives a whole breakdown. This island is called Pacifica. It was made as a getaway for when the Atlanteans kind of realized, oh wait, all of Atlantis is going to be underwater eventually. We need to have like an on-surface place for people to live. And they started bringing over like Atlantean beasts. And this is kind of just a bygone era, just a different time of things up here. And she's got one supervisor who's like, but what happens if he's telling the truth? Like, what happens if he is actually his son? And she's like, look, you grew up as a nomad. I appreciate the fact you don't recognize how stupid what you're saying is, but like, this is exactly the kind of trickery Atlanteans love. I am not going to fall for it. So, turns out that because of her staff being the staff of storms, it's the only thing that could hold back the deity of this island, which is a giant creature named Karaku, the volcano god, who demands sacrifice every once in a while, or else all Pacifica will be drowned in lava. So they show up with Aquaman. They're like, hey, Karaku, we brought a body for you before our normally scheduled time, so here you go. And so Gantu comes up and he presents the body of Aquaman, or actually he's about to throw Mara, and then Aquaman's like, nope, and he just moves around and manages to kick Gantu off into the pit instead. And they're like, oh god, he's awake. And so Aquaman's like, look, you may have become a killer, mother, but I know you won't hurt your own people. So he grabs hold of the advisor, and the advisor's just like, do it, shoot him anyway. And as the volcano god starts to like rumble and wake up, Atlanta is forced to split her attention and focus on the volcano god, holding it back, while Aquaman is able to get out along with the advisor. And the advisor's like, oh, you cannot escape the queen. And he's like, I don't want to escape. I want to talk to her. I want her to know who I am. And you're an advisor. Can't you make her listen? He's like, why should I? It's because it's the truth. It's because I am her son. And she's like, look, she probably already knows that. I think she recognizes that you look exactly like her. Like, that is 100% a thing. But she's been hurt. She's been really hurt here. And she explains that once she found Pacifica, she came back for this woman's kind. And they have purple eyes, and apparently that's a whole thing where they can see the future whenever they are asked a question. They're like oracles in that way. And so they were exiled because, like, that's a creepy power to have. And so Atlanta gathered them up and gave them a home here. So turns out because this island has a bunch of beasts from old Atlantis, Queen Atlanta is able to control them. So all of a sudden, all these wild land beasts start converging on Aquaman, start attacking. The Avengers like, oh, you must run. And they grab hold of her. Her name's Linu. They bring her down to the beach, and Aquaman's like, look, I'm not fighting my mom. I will outrun her all the time. I'm not going to start fighting her. And Atlanta's like, haha, we can do something. Let's do it. But then all of a sudden the Maelstrom starts activating. And out comes an Atlantean army through the portal. And Aquaman's like, crap, they must have followed us. And Atlanta's like, oh, look, see? This is what I'm talking about. They brought an army here to fight again. Everyone fight up. This guy's a dick and I don't like him. So in comes Tula and a bunch of the armed guard. They start firing off shots at the animals and creatures attacking Aquaman. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, we're saving your ass. Clearly you need it. And he's like, no, stop. That's not what I want. That's my mother up there. But then, because of all this craziness, all this stuff going on, there's a big rumbling, and out comes the volcano god. He's none too pleased. Well, I think it's pretty obvious how Aquaman's mother's gonna end up dead. Gotta satiate the volcano god somehow. So yeah, it's I like it. I like it not because it is a very well-crafted story. I like it because it is just so silly. I like it because it is just like Aquaman running around being like, Mommy, please listen, and like just refusing to fight because of that. It's the turn of the page of Atlanta being like, oh, screw you, and then just blasting with the laser. Top tier. It's a dumb fun book, but ultimately it is still fun. So I think I'm going to give this one probably... It's a 7. It's barely scratching that 7 for me, but it is still at that level. It's just... I think this whole arc has been wild from beginning to end, but this is the first time where, like, no, I'm having fun with this. The Flash number 39, written by Robert Venditti and Van Jensen, art by Brett Booth. So last issue, we had Flash almost killed a guy, and so Patty got real suspicious of Flash, saying like, uh-oh, maybe he's not all in the up and up. And then also in Speed Force realm, Flash headed off on his mission to go get his powers back. So we pick up during the reign of criminals during Forever Evil, death storms causing chaos in Central City, and he's talking to Alistair, Overload is saying to his horse Alistair, like, there was a blackout during Forever Evil, and everything was quiet. There was no electronics going on, and it was great, and I didn't feel any pain. But then the electronics came back on, and that hum, that damn incessant hum, it caused me such pain, and it tortured me. How is that fair? That they brought it all back. So any time that hum kicks on again, I grow more angry, more in pain, but also more powerful. And soon I am going to feel good again. I'm going to take it all out one way or another. So we cut to Iris. She's talking to her editor, basically saying like, yeah, no, Flash tried to kill someone. Get it on the front page. I'm getting more sources now as we speak. And she walks into this used bookstore. Nobody's in here. And as she makes her way into the back, she's like, yeah, I got someone in the police force who's going to get me information. Someone who's always been there. So as she gets to the back of the room, turns out it's Patty. Patty's like, oh, yeah, I picked this bookstore because whenever you run late, I can keep myself entertained. And she's like, yeah, okay, anyway, get me what info you got on Flash. Give me everything you got. And she's like, look, some of the witnesses at the bank said that the injury to Napalm was an accident. And she's like, I was there. I saw it. He was going to kill him. So please, give me anything you got on the Flash. This story's going to be huge. And she's like, I just can't believe the Flash would do this. After all the stuff that we did together, he wouldn't kill. And she's like, well, are there any other weird deaths? Like something that's unexplained? And she's like, well, there's this one guy whose heart was shredded from the inside, and I may have found a fiber on that might have been weird, but it couldn't have been Flash. It definitely wasn't Flash. And he's like, okay, well, how about you just give me whatever information you got, and we can go against it as best you can. And so she says, look, I will let you know when Flash is on the move, and I will let you know where he's going. So then we cut over to Future Barry, who is doing autopsies on people who were killed by this Overload character. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is weird. It's got all this crazy stuff here. And I know it's Overload because I'm from the future, but we never found Overload because he managed to escape. However, in this autopsy, I found he has horsehair. Why the hell would he have horsehair? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe a connection to horses? And in comes Patty and just like, hey, you keep on saying Overload. What does that mean? She's like, nothing. Just the nickname I gave it. Don't worry about it. Anyway, these guys all had death via electricity, something similar I noticed with a recent homicide, so I'm looking them up again. Anyway, I gotta go. Flash stuff. I'll be back later. And Patty picks up Barry's phone, turns on a GPS tracking app, and she's like, oh, Barry, don't forget your phone. And she's like, oh, thanks. What would I do without you? Cut over to the Speed Force. I'm just going to get all this out of the way real quick. They're climbing up a mountain to get to this lightning spot, and in come a bunch of Quetzalcoatl's, giant dinosaur birds, and they start shooting at them, trying to take them out, but ultimately one of them gets eaten and torn apart in midair, and then it seems like Flash is going to befall the same fate as he's picked up. However, the one guy, he grabs him, manages to save him, and it's Selkirk, and he's like, oh, thank me after. We're getting you up to that temple. So they get up to this Speed Force temple, and inside there's a bunch of Flash imagery. And they say, oh, you're going to be able to get me back my powers this way. And he's like, yeah, I studied the drawings. I know how to summon the lightning now. And Flash, as he looks at the drawings, is like, but wait, if you knew how to summon the lightning, why didn't you do it any time before? And he's like, well, we didn't have the necessary ingredients, as to say. And then Barry looks at one drawing, and it's literally just a drawing of Flash being sprawled out on a sacrifice wheel as Selkirk is standing over top. And he's like, oh, wait, you're going to kill me. And then he gets butted in the back of the head by a rifle. So he's out. So to pick back up with the other Future Barry stuff, we see Central City. The city is announcing they are launching a citywide free Wi-Fi grid. It's going to be able to connect all over the place, and definitely is not going to cause any sort of problems to people with sensitivity to electricity. So at that point, Overload's like, oh, this is going to hurt me so much, but it's going to make me so powerful. And Barry knows where he's looking. He's like, Overload must be here. I just got to look for someone out of place. And he sees Overload like, Hurr! And he's like, there he is. And he just goes in with a huge punch, hits him in the face, and just saying like, you would have killed 207 people, frying all the electronics nearby, making it so that we wouldn't have any electronic fingerprint of you. That's why we couldn't find you. But now I'm going to kill you. And immediately as he says kill you, we see a shadowy figure from behind say like, you're going to what? We get an interstitial to the past Flash stuff at that point. But then what we see is Patty and Iris. And Patty's like, you say you're going to kill that guy? And he's like, what? No, I didn't. I mean, he's a killer. You got to believe me. He deserves this. And Patty's like, look, Flash, Barry, whatever you want to call. He needs to be put through the legal system. That's kind of the whole thing here, okay? If he's guilty, if he's committed a crime, which frankly, you said he's going to commit a crime, which I don't think that counts, he needs to go through the system. And Barry's like, I'm going to save everyone. And he starts charging up a punch. Patty grabs hold of his arm, and so Patty gets like full-on flipped over top of Barry. She ends up screwing up her shoulder, and Barry's like, oh, Patty, I'm sorry, you gotta believe it. And Iris just comes in like, what is wrong with you? Get away from her. How dare you? Don't you touch her again. So the city boots up the Wi-Fi grid. Immediately Overload gets an overload of power, and he's like, oh, no more pain, no more. And he blasts off a huge bunch of electricity as we get a split page with also showing Selkirk about to kill the Flash. Sure. I don't have anything negative to say about it, but I also don't really have anything positive. It's just kind of like, yep, that's the next chapter there. That's what we're doing. I hope this is the end. Like, next issue should be the end of Future Flash. Like, if it's Barry coming back and saying, like, let's end this. But, like, I don't want another issue where we have to pretend that Flash is still good. Like, just make him done with, okay? It's not like it's been a horrible arc, but this arc has been so stretched out that it's just kind of felt like this. I mean, honest to God, the Future Flash stuff was already solidly going when we had the Future's End storyline, and that was like 6 months ago. So this has been like a full year we've been setting up this future Flash stuff, and I'm just done. I'm just done with it. It's overstayed its welcome. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one 6. It's, again, art-wise not great, writing-wise fine, but it's just not doing anything. I just want it to be over with. Secret Origins number 10, written by a bunch of people because it's an anthology book covering Batgirl, Firestorm, and Poison Ivy. So we start off with Batgirl, written by the current Batgirl writers of Brenden, Fletcher, and Cameron Stewart, art by Irene Coe. And we get what is technically in continuity, like in the story, the next chapter, where we open up with Batgirl talking about herself, saying like, oh, people assume I was always too smart, too different, too driven, but I'm no matter what, I'm still Batgirl. I'm still... And then she like hesitates for a moment, and we see her coming out of an MRI machine. Her dad is there waiting for her. We see some doctors saying like, yeah, all right, so what we're trying to do is install a chip, and we're going to take scans of her brain, translate that brain data into programming, and then that's going to work with this chip, this implant into her nervous system to be able to get her up and running. And as she is sitting out in the doctor's waiting room, coding something on her laptop, she sees a young woman crying nearby, also in a wheelchair, and she goes up to comfort her. We find out that this is Frankie, a friend of hers from the current run, who has some form of muscle dystrophy, and she doesn't need the chair right now, but the doctors are saying she will within like 5 years. So Barbara comforts her a little bit, and she's like, oh, thanks so much, and by the way, I love your laptop and so much. So they quickly became friends, and we see them... they enjoy doing things like dancing and sports and karate and stuff like that. But then Barbara gets suited up and she becomes Batgirl. We then get the full history of it, where we get her origin story back during 0 Year, where there was an attack on GCPD. And so she puts on a bulletproof vest that had a Batman symbol on it and a cowl, and she goes out and beats up some guys, and Batman finds her and is like, you did this? And she's like, yes, I was born to fight crime. And we see her relationship with her father, how he was a great man, and then one day as they're just chilling at home and she's saying like, oh, I was thinking about joining the force, she opens up the front door and wouldn't you know it, the Joker shot her and she becomes paralyzed. So we show more training with Frankie, where they're doing some like taekwondo, and Babs ends up flipping Frankie, and Frankie's like, oh, what the hell? I told you to wait. Like, that was too much. And she's like, you think any psychopath out there is going to wait just because you have muscular dystrophy? Like, they're going to come out. No, I'm helping you by being this hard. I can help everyone. And we keep cutting to the code. We keep cutting to shots of the code in front of her face and whatnot. And it's saying, oh, I found a way to ensure that crime... or no one ever has to suffer from crime again. I'm going to make this algorithm that can predict crime, and it's going to send operatives to go deal with them. And Frankie's like, that sounds really dangerous and like something you shouldn't be doing. Maybe you should. And she's just like, dangerous is good. Criminals should fear me. And then all of a sudden she starts freaking out because she sees memories that she has no memory of. She sees herself being healed, and she starts to walk. She sees her being friends with Alicia. We see her... going out and joining the Birds of Prey, fighting against her brother, fighting against the Joker, and death of the family. And she's like, why don't I remember? This is me, but it's not my life. That's my body. But wait, where is my body? And she says, I'm still Batgirl. I will take back what belongs to me. I will save this city from itself. And it's very implicitly implied that this is the algorithm. This is the brain scan. This is what is currently going on in the Batgirl run at this point. So... sure. Yeah. All right. I think it works. It's a very interesting way to tell the origin story while still being part of the overarching narrative of Batgirl. I think overall I enjoy it. So I'll give it a solid 8. I think it's a very well written issue. Then we get to Firestorm, which is written by Dan Jurgens, art by Shawn Chen. This is from the viewpoint of the two halves of Firestorm's mutual friend Tanya Liu, who is recording a video of what is the origin of Firestorm. And we say we've got Ronnie Raymond, the football guy, the jock, the man who could do everything, and Jason Rush, the science nerd, the guy who was on a fast track to like doing all the cool chemistry stuff. And they lived very different lives, yet also they like both had single parents and they had more in common than they'd like to admit, despite their differences in how they did things. So one day, Jason is interviewing Ronnie for the school paper. They're immediately thinking negative thoughts about each other because they just don't like how each other live their lives. And then Jason ends up writing a scathing article, which Ronnie comes in to chastise him about. But at that same moment, wouldn't you know it, terrorists attack the school looking for something that Jason has his hands on. Made by Martin Stein, it is the Firestorm Protocols. And as one of their friends is shot, he activates the protocols, which gives Ronnie and Jason incredible powers. And Ronnie, both of them are able to fly, both of them are able to do stuff like that. Ronnie can fire off fire blasts with his hands, while Jason can transform the atomic structure of things. And we see the plot of the early arcs of the book. They were two separate beings that they could merge together to form a being called Fury that they were not in control of. There was a whole thing with Zithertech trying to get back the IP of Firestorm, and then also like Justice League International they met up with, and a bunch of other stuff. Until finally they were fighting against Posar and Scorn inside of the quantum field, and when all pushes came to shoves, the field collapsed and they were no longer able to transform into Firestorm. Or so they thought, because it turns out that when they end up touching each other, they can now transform into a single being of Firestorm, with Ronnie in the driver's seat and Jason just kind of giving advice and acting as a conscience in his head. And we see that they start getting to know each other better. They start becoming friends. They still have their arguments and disagreements and stuff like that, but ultimately they do start working together. And they become friends. We see that we get a bit where they run into the Teen Titans, where Ronnie's mom gets captured, and they run into Multiplex and a whole bunch of other people, until finally, at the end of the series, Superman comes up and says, "Heyo, want to join the Justice League?" And he's like, "Hell yeah!" And so now he's part of the Justice League, although I don't think he's been in many issues recently. And so Tanya ends saying, "There's the secret origin of Firestorm." And it turns out she's actually on like a Skype call with Ronnie and Jason saying, "Okay, but why did you record that? What if someone gets their hands on it? That's not good." And she's like, "I'm not going to share it with anybody, but it's good to have that on the record. You're going to be grateful that someone went through and documented everything." And they're like, "All right, fair enough. So it'll be great for when we have a Firestorm movie directed by Spielberg." And Jason's like, no, it'll be J.J. Abrams. And they meet up with each other in real life, and they shake hands and transform into Firestorm. So I like the art. Sean Chen's art's fantastic. There is something to be said about these secret origins that are 100% just, here's a recap of the entirety of their New 52 history, because that's just everything we saw there. From beginning to end, it's just what the New 52 series was. So, is it bad? No, not inherently, but it's literally everything I already read with nothing new added on. So, 7. It's fine. And finally, we get Poison Ivy, written by Christy Marks, art by, Stepan Sejic. I know it's Sejic or Sejic. So this one opens up with a farmer who's basically saying, like, it's a young woman farmer saying, like, I've been growing corn with my family for 20 years. And then this totally not Monsanto group moved in. And they've got so many more acres than me, and they've got genetically modified crops that can withstand this herbicide. So they're spreading herbicide constantly, killing all of my crops. And then they try to sue me because they tested the genes of my plants and said that I'm stealing their genetic IP. And I'm just so pissed they're suing me. What do I do? And we see she's talking to this redheaded woman who introduces herself as Pamela Isley. And she says, Dr. Pamela Isley. To which point the farmer's like, "Oh, I thought you were a lawyer, not a doctor. Never mind. You're not going to be able to help me with my lawsuit." And Isley's just like, "You let me handle them. I am justice in my own way." And so she goes onto the Monsanto fields. It's called Descanto. It's Monsanto. And we see this guy spraying herbicide, and he's like, "Man, this is private property, and you're standing right in a patch of poison ivy." And she's like, "Oh, I don't mind." And she controls the plants to basically go out, strangle the guy, wrap him up in poison ivy, and just like, "Oh, the plants have a reason to be here. You are not so lucky." So we see her later on getting to the headquarters of Descanto, and she's speaking with the CEO, and the CEO is like, "Well, I see you want to be employed, and my secretary insisted that I hear you out, but I'm a bit concerned that you left Wayne Enterprises under questionable circumstances. And she's like, oh, Mr. Wayne didn't see the applications of my pheromone system, but I have a feeling you will. And she starts like stripping off her jacket and getting a lot more comfortable, letting her hair down. And the guy's like, I don't know what you think is going on here. And she just lays a big sloppy kiss on him and just like, oh, well, you're ready to do anything I ask of you because I naturally have the pheromones now, right? And she's like, yes, anything you want. And she's like, good, good, good. First, you're going to call off that lawsuit in a way that nobody could possibly put it back on the table. And he's like, can do, totally done. What next? He's like, now you're going to authorize a payment of $5 million to that woman. And he's like, yes, absolutely, but please tell me more about you. I want to know everything about you. And then we get her history. She had a mother that she enjoyed gardening with. She had an abusive father. The father ended up killing the mother. And when she went off to school and learned about stuff, she figured out a type of poison that she could put on her lips. She gave her dad a kiss, and it killed him in prison like 5 minutes later. So we see in college she was put through the ringer because she was doing like experiments and stuff like that, but she already has seduced the dean, so able to use her pheromones to get a good job at Wayne Enterprises. Bruce Wayne, not so hot on the idea that she was messing with free will, fires her, but in trying to get her experiments out of the lab before she was fired, she ended up becoming Poison Ivy, and she is now one with the plants. And so we cut back to the Monsanto guy. She's got him down on his knees, fills his mouth up with some sort of seeds, and just like, you make these unnatural plants, and then you spray everything with poison, and that poisons the rest of the green, the rest of the plants around. You are unnatural and not welcome in this ecosystem. And she starts growing the seeds inside of his throat, killing him, saying like, oh, it is all of your toxins will poison the world in a cycle of madness. I am the guardian of the green. I am Poison Ivy. And yeah, he dead. So yeah, that story is pretty much just like average what I expect from a Poison Ivy origin story, because we've already seen that before. The villains issue of Poison Ivy covered the exact same setup there, but the Sedgwick art is what really sets it over the top, because Sedgwick knows how to draw sexy Poison Ivy. Sedgwick knows how to draw anything sexy. So already top tier there. Not that like, it's a horn dog sort of issue, but like it works for this temptress, seductress sort of act that Poison Ivy's got going on there. So I'm gonna easily say that one is a 7.5, no doubt. Very good. So overall, solid issue of Secret Origins, and be sure to check out those stories if you're interested. Deathstroke number 5, written and art by Tony S. Daniels. So last issue, Harley got with Deathstroke and betrayed him because she was upset he betrayed the Suicide Squad, and then maybe she called Batman? She definitely called Batman, so it was a standoff between Deathstroke and Batman. This issue picks up with Harley just instigating more, just being like, oh yeah, Batman, kick his head in, do whatever you gotta do. And Deathstroke's just like, Harley, you suck. So they start fighting. It is just an extended fight scene for almost like 3/4 of the issue here, with most of it just being that Deathstroke's like, I should maybe not have the upper hand here, but I shouldn't be losing so badly. And like, he gets the sword knocked from his hand where Batman just like slaps him on the back of the wrist. He's throwing heavy punches. And Deathstroke is admiring it. He's like, Batman is a beast. Like, he is good at what he does. And I am managing to every once in a while, like, land a good shot. But Batman is hitting me back 3 for every 1 I land on him. And he's like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not doing so? I'm like an amateur here. And he realizes it's the 2-eye thing. Ever since I got young again, I got 2 eyes, and like, I'm so used to fighting with one, and this mask is not blind on the right eye. It's just a very dark tint. So like, I am technically able to see through it, and it's throwing me off. So he does what he can here. Harley is still just instigating from the background, just like, oh yeah, just getting on my nerves. Someone kill somebody already. And as Batman's throwing punches, he's really landing him on Deathstroke. Deathstroke says, if anything happens to my son, Batman, I'm holding you responsible. And Batman's like, whoa, hold up. Your son, Harley, you didn't mention anything about a son. And she's like, okay, yeah, he's got a kid, and the kid's in trouble, and he's also here in Gotham. Who cares? Kick his ass! So they continue fighting a little bit more. And he's like, oh man, I should be able to take time with this. But like, if you are at all not on your A game going up against Batman, you are done for. You are not going to be able to survive. And Deathstroke does land a few punches on him. He manages to get a pretty good setting, but then sneaking up from behind with the mallet, simultaneously with Batman throwing a punch, Deathstroke gets both sides of his head just bashed in. So Batman knocks him back, lands him on his ass. And as they're continuing the fight, Harley's like, well, this has been fun, but I gotta go. So I've left you both a present. Enjoy. And she leaves. She jumps out of the room as apparently a box of presents start ticking. And Deathstroke's like, Harley, what did you do? And Batman's like, don't think this is over, Deathstroke. And then the whole house explodes. Deathstroke is underneath the rubble. Obviously, Batman is too, but they're both fine. Harley finds Deathstroke's glove and is just like, hey, look, for the record, I believe you when you say that you didn't betray the Suicide Squad, but I had already set all this up. Plus, I thought you would do better against Batman. I genuinely thought you had a chance there, not that you would suck so badly. So as she's talking down the rubble, all of a sudden Deathstroke's arm comes up and just grabs her around the neck, just being like, I believe that you're crazy enough to actually do all that stuff, and that's the only reason I'm not killing you right now. And she's like, yeah, well, I am that crazy. And it's like, all right, first off, what do you know about my son? And just like, oh, yeah, I heard you were coming. I put my feelers out. Turns out your daughter, Rose, has been working for Penguin, trying to get back on her feet. Then she found out that your son was in the area, so she was going to come and try to help him out. And he's like, cool, now I'm going to kill you. And she's like, whoa, hold on. I know all of Penguin's safe houses, so that's how you still need me. And he's like, fine, whatever. So they ride off on Harley's moped as Batman gets out of the rubble. It's just like, oh, God, all right, they're in my city. Meanwhile, over on the Jericho plot, Jericho and Rose are waiting for somebody to show up, and Rose is like, this guy is a friend of Dad's, he's a good person, he's going to protect you from our grandfather, and he's going to help you with whatever it is that's going on with you, Jericho. And Jericho's like, okay, anybody who's a friend of our father's is not a good person, so that's just already out the gate. Don't think that. Secondly, we do not know anything about this guy, so like, how do we know he's safe? And she's like, don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. I'm going to protect you. So out of the car steps Possum, who was back from issue 1. Not a cool dude. Not on Deathstroke's side. And Jericho's like, I don't like this guy. I've got vibes with him. I don't like him. And Rose is like, don't worry about it. He's here to help you. And maybe the reason that like you can't read his mind or tap into his mind, because that is Jericho's power, is that he knows your stuff and he's just protecting himself a little bit. And he's like, okay, but I'm getting like pure evil vibes off of him, and that's not a good sign. And Rose is like, okay, look, if you're that upset about it, yeah, hey, buddy, we're just going to call this off. Like, let's just step away here. And Possum's like, ooh, hey, can I get you to listen to something first, though? And he presses a button on his phone, and all of a sudden Jericho just falls into a seizure. Rose is totally pissed off. She's going for the kill on Possum. But before she can get to Possum just blows up into like 40 pieces. And she's like, was that you, Jericho? I didn't do anything. So she comes over to try to help Jericho out of the seizure. And then a voice from above says, oh, Jericho can't hurt anyone right now, my dear. And we see it belongs to Deathstroke's father. I think it's Odysseus? Ulysses? It's one of those old Greek names. Along with Bronze Tiger and I think it's Cheshire or the other one. I don't know. So all of them are here. They've got Jericho on the ropes, whatever it is. They just wanted to draw Deathstroke and Batman fighting. Like, it's so much of the issue, and it literally is just... Look, I get it. Tony S. Daniel, you draw a mean Batman. You do very well on Deathstroke. Your fight scenes are very good. It works. Collectively, it's not a bad fight scene, but when it eats up so much of the issue, it does just feel like you're trying to burn an issue. It feels like, okay, all I really need to accomplish by the end here is Deathstroke is on the tail and Jericho's in trouble. So I think I can allot 14 pages to a Batman fight and still get that done. And he does. So it's not a bad issue, but it is absolutely like, you can get this exact same fallout of like everything that happens in this issue with 2 pages. That's all you would need. So I'm going to say this is I got to give it like a 6.5 because it's not so much whether or not I enjoy the issue. I do. But I also have to take into account, do I feel like my time was wasted? And to some extent here, yeah, a little bit. It feels like this month as a whole in Deathstroke was just kind of a, well, I didn't need that. Star-Spangled War Stories featuring G.I. Zombie number 7, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Scott Hampton. So, last issue, because Jared the zombie managed to get into the area, the underground bunker area, and they realized it, they set it for self-destruct, and they're nuking the whole place. So, we open up in DC where Gravedigger is interrogating that one guy from the beginning. I can't remember his name. And he's like, the guy's not giving him anything. He's like, look, your other guys came in before. You guys don't do torture. I know that, so I'm not giving you anything. And Gravedigger's like, I'm sorry. You speak like you know me, but clearly you don't. And he pulls out like a hammer and a chisel. And he's like, go ahead and pick, finger or toe. And he's like, he's like, no, see, this is your last chance to get me any sort of information. But this is still going to happen. You pick finger or toe, or else I'm picking for you. And he's like, toe. And he's like, finger it is then. So immediately he comes out of the room. He's got information. They know exactly where this whole thing is. And it's like, all right, yeah, Jared's already in the field. He's good to go. Don't worry about it. But you did a little bit of an extra legal stuff in there. And this is Gravedigger talking to some other guy. And the other guy's just like, you did a little extra legal stuff. And Gravedigger's like, well, if the president wants to throw the book at me, I'll go ahead and let him do that, just as soon as he also congratulates me for stopping an entire zombie plague from taking over the United States. Cool? And so he calls up and he's like, yeah, all right, we're going to need to get all of our attention over to Utah. So we see Jared is actually managing to follow right behind where Carmen is, and she's asking questions to the person who's escorting her out of the building, and Jared's just like, they're not going to notice me because they're too focused on getting out, so I could just overhear the conversation. And Carmen's like, yeah, where are we going? And it's like, oh, they're nuking the building, self-destruct. Everyone else here thinks it's a drill, but we got to get out of here. We're either going to go to San Francisco or Ecuador, but we're like, don't worry about it. So they go to hop on a plane. Carmen looks back for just a second, and Jared's like, good luck. I'm here. Have fun. And Carmen's like, okay, all right. So Jared goes back in. He sees a bunch of people like not taking things super seriously, at least not trying to get miles away from here. And he talks to this guy and he's like, hey, I need to talk to you. And he's like, do I know you? He's like, nope. But he pulls out a gun. And he's like, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not going to tell you anything unless you tell me who you are. And he's like, I'm the guy who's going to just try to stop this nuke from detonating. And he's like, wait, it's not a drill? No, it's not a drill. Your boss doesn't want to leave anything behind. You got a way to check it out? And he's like, I mean, kind of. So he opens up a program, checks some stuff, and he's like, yeah, you got less than 10 minutes. You might want to speed that up. And as he checks it, he's like, oh my God, why? Why would they do it? And he says, yeah, okay, it's set to go off in 8 minutes. And Jared's like, can it be shut down? And he's like, well, only by the two people who started it, and they just boarded a jet 10 minutes ago and took off. So, yeah, no, we're all going to die. And Jared's like, okay, well, how big is the nuke? And he's like, it doesn't matter. This whole facility's got so much stuff in here, like it's going to kill everybody inside. If you want to shoot me, go for it, but I'm going to go be with my wife, okay? And he's like, yeah, no, that's fine. Hey, does that phone, can I call out from there? And he's like, yeah, just dial like 86 beforehand, you're good. So he calls up, he gets Gravedigger on the line. He tells Gravedigger's like, yeah, we're flying out to Utah now. What? A nuke? Oh, all right, well, good luck. So we see that Jared manages to hijack a car, just starts driving away as fast as he can. As soon as he gets at a reasonable distance, the nuke explodes. The whole area goes up. It tosses his car end over end for like 100 meters and throws him into a gully. So from the plane, we see Carmen looking out, seeing the explosion. Forrest, the guy who set it off, is like, can I have everyone's attention? Yeah, we just had to blow up our thing. Everyone inside is dead, and we lost a whole bunch of research doing that. We did manage to get out the black ice, our major export that we are working on, but someone here messed up, and I will not rest until I skin them alive. But for now, let's join in prayer as we remember the fallen. And Carmen's like, okay. So we see a car come up and notice the burning explosion that is Jared's car, and it's like, nobody could have survived that. And then Jared pops his head out, and he's like, hey, fellas, give me a hand. And it's like, oh, God, it's a zombie. So they literally say, oh, God, it's a zombie. He's going to eat us. And Jared's like, hey, that's only kind of true. So they hop in a car and start driving, but they drive towards the radiation zone. And so immediately they turn back around and start driving back towards Jared. And he's like, oh, good. They learned not to drive into the radiation. But then their car crashes and they come out as zombies. So it turns out some of the virus was aerosolized in the nuclear explosion, and it's still causing the zombie virus here on the Utah Salt Flats. So Jared's like, well, I don't want to have to do this, but I have to do this. And he kills one of them. He's trying to kill the other one, but he's a little bit better of a fighter. And then in comes one of Gravedigger's men dressed in full head to toe. No way you can get infected. And it's like, oh, hey, I think that zombie's one of ours. That's Agent Cabe. And Jared's like, are you guys good guys? And he's like, yep, sent by Gravedigger himself. He's like, cool. Here's what I need you to do. Contact Gravedigger. Tell him that the virus is airborne here. And then it's the same mix we saw in Tennessee. Now I'm going to pass out for a little while. And he just passes out and they carry him back into the truck. So Carmen and the rest of the group arrive to a different facility in a place called Bolinas. It is a small hippie town that also doesn't like the government, but they think that it's just like a green research facility and not nukes. So they go into another underground facility 4 stories down, and a couple of guards are there to grab the 2 women as they get out. And Carmen's like, hey, look, we were just on a jet. I felt uncomfortable peeing up there, but like I gotta pee first. And it's like, nope, orders are you come now. And she's like, look, guys, if you want to come in the room with me, fine, so be it. But like I gotta pee. So they go into the bathroom, and Carmen's like, can I go into the stall alone? And she's like, no, I have orders not to let you out of my sight. And she's like, all right. And then Carmen starts beating the guy up, takes his gun, and she's like, look, they already are going to be suspecting me. I'm the newest one to the group, so I have to assume my cover is blown. I got to get out of here now. So she grabs a pistol, runs upstairs, checks the clip. There's only like 4 bullets in it. She's like, what kind of good soldier only has 4 bullets in his clip? And then all of a sudden the alarm starts going off because somebody found the body in the bathroom. So she has to start shooting her way through. She kills a few guys, manages to make her way out of the building and runs towards the tree line. She comes across a hippie van, and the hippie's like, hey, man, you go ahead. Like, if you're holding me up, I'm all for it. I'd love to accommodate a lovely lady like yourself. And so she takes his phone, calls to Gravedigger, says, like, look, here's the location. Here's the whole thing. I'll give you whatever doomsday information I can. And then as they're driving, they're stopped by a blockade of gunmen. And she's like, yeah, I don't have any weapons, and I don't think this guy does either. So it's been an honor working with you, sir. And we see Gravedigger's talking to Jared, who's getting back on his feet, and it's just like, well, that was your partner. You up for this? And he's like, yeah, is she in trouble? And he's like, oh, you have no idea. So, final issue coming up next time. I like it. It's such an unconventional series. Like, it's not quite spy thriller. That's the wrong way of looking at it. But I don't know how to put it in. It's a thriller, for sure, but like spy is just not the right term for it. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm never bored by this book. The fact that they do, like, they easily could have made it where the end of issue 8 is, oh, look, the explosion, the nuke, the big awe moment. But in this, it's just like a nothing moment in the middle of this issue. The nuke doesn't matter. Like, it's completely superfluous to the rest of everything else. So, like, that's the kind of book you're dealing with, and I'm super interested in seeing how this is all going to wrap up. I assume we'll be victorious, but frankly, I can't be sure. So overall, I'm going to give this one... I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think it's not quite as good as some previous issues. I'm hoping I gave some previous issues an 8 because I did find them very enjoyable, but it's still very good. It's a very good book, and I am shocked that nobody ever really talks about it. Justice League Dark number 39, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Andre Guinaldo. So last issue, the House of Mystery was reborn, and they took it in to time, and then all of a sudden they were brought into a whirlpool of time where everything was falling apart and there were time gremlins everywhere. So this issue opens up with the Void. And it is actually the Void before creation that is personified and given the ability to speak and says, like, I am the beginning of the beginning, and I will be the end of the end, and this is what all things must return to. And we see the Justice League Dark is trying to deal with the time gremlins, and they're saying, like, oh, whatever Zatanna did, it's failed, it's collapsing everything around us, and they point out, like, no, actually, her spell worked perfectly, it did repair the ruptures in the time stream, but then something else is causing this, and then all the gremlins start jumping out and trying to attack them. A dead man's like, let him come. We've been doing crazy stuff all this time, and I'm sick of it. Come on, let's see if you can do anything to a guy who's already dead. And then they, like, leap through him, and he's like, oh god, I'm falling apart. So then it goes to Andrew Bennett, Frankenstein, Swamp Thing, they all start getting torn apart / invaded by these goopy black monsters that are made of darkness themselves, the Void before. And the Void is talking, saying, like, these people are stupid and foolish, but brave and insignificant. It's whatever. They still think that their lives have meaning. It's time to show them that's not the case. So all of them start getting torn apart one by one. Xanadu's holding up a shield as Nightmare Nurse is trying to get Zatanna back on her feet because she's still pretty much unconscious. And Xanadu's like, we have nothing that's powerful enough to deal with this. And Zatanna comes back for just like a quarter second and is like, listen, there's one thing we can do. I need you guys' help. Tempus Duratus. And they don't say what that means yet, but we see, once again, Swamp Thing, all of them are starting to get torn apart. But then, one by one, they start to overcome. And Swamp Thing uses his vines to snap all the gremlins. Andrew Bennett turns into a swarm of bats and pierces each of them. Frankenstein throws up because the black goop was inside of him, and he didn't like that. And then Dead Man, despite being down in the water, the oceans of time beneath, he says, you think that you can overcome me because you have whatever on your side, but I'm a dead man. This isn't even my true form. It's just the way I see myself. If I focus hard enough, I can become an army of dead men. And so he does, and he attacks all the gremlins, and it seems like they take them all out. Right up until they, like, turn around and they say, oh, for every one we killed, there's 1,000 more on the way. And it's this giant, like, tidal wave coming at them. So there's not much they can do. And they're like, where are they all coming from? And the Void in its narration box is like, oh, it comes from me. But they also are me because it is just the Void made carnate. And so are they. So Nightmare Nurse talks back to Zatanna of like, Tempest Uranus, that's freezing time. Are you sure about it? Like, do you think we can actually do it? And Xanadu points out, like, if we do that, it could kill us. And it's like, well, if we don't do it, it's going to rip apart time, not just for our universe, but the multiverse as a whole. So, yeah, kind of worth it. So they cast the Tempest Uranus one, and it freezes a little time bubble for just them, and nothing else is moving. And they're like, whoa, it worked. We froze everything. But we still need to figure out what the hell we're going to do to be able to reverse this. And Zatanna passes out again. And she's just like, you two will find a way. And then Manor Nurse is like, nah, man, we need you. And she's like, nope, I'm done. I lived 1,000 lifetimes over in the previous arc, and I'm just done. I tell John, I've always. And the Nightmare Nurse is like, damn it, Z, I'm a doctor. I'm going to heal you. And so she casts all these spells and tells Xanadu to help her out. And then Zatanna's just like, huh? What? Oh, okay, I'm good again. Thank you. And then they're like, okay, now let's focus. How do we get the multiverse back on track? And then out of the maelstrom of time comes these big dark tendrils that coalesce and form into Pralaya, the goddess of the void. And we see basically just saying, like, you guys are insignificant, and yet you still think that you can alter the inevitable. Like, you still, I'm getting rid of creation, and you still think you can do that. And they're like, Pralaya, the goddess of the void. And it's like, calling me a goddess is an insult. I am so much far beyond a godness. Even this form is just a projection. Like, if you saw the true version of the void, your brains would collapse. So at that point, she's like, you ruptured the time stream? And she's like, well, yes, but also no, you guys started it. And it's like, what do you mean we started it? And he said, well, when Zatanna and Constantine cast that Kamdeva curse that made it so, like, they didn't love each other or whatever, it lowered the barrier between the void and creation, and therefore she's just speeding it up. Because she's like, this just always happens. This isn't the first time we've had a go-around. The void starts with nothing, something comes out of it, the something goes away, and we go back to void. And that's just the ebb and flow. We just do that over and over again. And Xanadu brings in the rest of the Justice League Dark into the bubble so they can have conversation as well. And it's like, you were the one who devoured the Kingdom of Now. You were that giant black wave that attacked. You're a monster. And she's like, a monster? That means nothing. That's a nothing term. I exist outside of morality. I am the void. You guys keep on saying that, like, your lives mean something. Swamp Thing, you are literally a cursed half monster, half man. Andrew Bennett, you are literally a cursed monster man. A lot of you are just cursed monster men. I'm noticing that now. That's pretty much all of you. And you all just want to let your pain drift away. That's it, right? And Dead Man steps up being like, no. life is important. That's what I've learned today. I've learned that we're not just going to roll over and surrender, and I know life is important because I'm the only one here who's dead. So you all need to listen to me. And they're all like, you're right, dead man. We should take life as a gift, a sacred gift, not just throw it away. And Pelletier is like, what about you, Zatanna? You seem more emo than usual. And Zatanna's like, yeah, I don't think life's a gift. I think we've all suffered enough, guys. So she literally just drops the bubble against all the other people's will. And they say, all right, take us, Pelletier. And so the void starts to consume them all. And it starts to devour all of creation. And as it does so, it says, oh, it is the source from which all things emerged and to which all things must return. And as everything blinks out, it says, this is the end. In suddenly comes what I have to assume is the House of Secrets. Because it ain't the House of Mystery. And it just shows up in the void. And that's where the issue ends. Look, I like it. I have enjoyed this arc a lot. So this particular issue I also like for a lot of those same reasons. I like the deeper philosophizing of like, okay, what does it mean to be in like the end of the void, and like why is it that we view ourselves as so special when like the void is just it's nihilism. It's just examining nihilism and the pros and cons of it. I just like the stakes are so huge. Like, this is the multiverse that literally just ended. And for some reason, like, oh, it just happened. Like, nobody even had a chance to stop it. Like, it was just like, yeah, that's what it was. So, I don't know. I from the sake of being part of a larger shared universe, I'm amazed that they got away with saying, like, yeah, the multiverse just ended. Like, that just happened. And nobody cares. Nobody even noticed it happened. So I'm sure we'll get it undone, but at the same point, it feels weird. From an individual comic standpoint, ignoring the larger shared universe, it's good. I like it. It's a solid like ending of an issue. It gives this large sense of stakes, but it's just being mirrored in the DC universe as a whole where you're like, nobody noticed this? This wasn't a problem for anybody else? That the multiverse just ended? Okay. So yeah, I'm going to say this one is a 7 for me, just not quite up to that 7.5. It's close though. And yeah, I'm curious how we undo the destruction via void. That seems pretty final to me, but you know, magic. Batman Eternal number 47, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fawkes, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Juan Ferreira? I'm never good at that name. So this issue opens up with Alfred having a nightmare, and Hush is just sitting in his cell watching him, being like, I wonder what butlers dream of. Is it dust bunnies? Is it not having enough plates for dinner for surprise guests? And all of a sudden Alfred jolts up yelling his daughter's name, and he's just like, oh, don't worry, Pennyworth, she's fine, she's just out running some errands. And we see Julius jumping over rooftops, seeing that the bat signal is up in the air. She puts on her own version of like the bat cowl, which is just a blank white mask and the bat signal on it. And turns out the person who lit the signal is Catwoman. It's Selena. And she's like, oh, you're not Batman, but you're also not Batgirl. Are you like an intern? Like, what's going on? She's like, I'm the one taking Batman's calls, and you're the one who called, so what do you need? And she's like, nah, I don't deal with secretaries. Get off my deck or I'll call security. And as she's walking away, Julia throws like a flying kick, and then Catwoman dodges. Catwoman tries throwing a kick. Julia blocks it. So they get into a little fight, but ultimately Julia comes out on top, and she's just like, I've had to listen on the comm to you and Batman flirt constantly, and every time you act like, oh, I don't need you, Batman, I don't want you around here, and then you throw in something about how you're taking pole dancing, and like, it's pathetic. And Catwoman's like, well, that's very rude. Anyway, fine, here you go. And she passes over this paper. It's a list of shipments coming in, manifests, that basically say all of Arkham Asylum's worst have been given a blank check to get whatever they want. And it's going to make everything a hell of a lot worse. So you have to stop them before there's a race to the top of craziness. And immediately Julia's just like grapple hooks out. And she's like, what, you're not going to thank me? And Julia's like, no, because that implies I owe you something. And I don't trust you. And she's like, well, Batman trusts me. And it's like, no, he doesn't. Also, go scratch litter, kitty. So we see Batman's flying back from trying to oppose Ra's al Ghul, and Alfred's the one who actually gets on the comm as he's calling in, just being like, hey, sorry, my daughter's out right now. I'm taking care of you, Batman. So it wasn't Ra's? And he's like, no, it wasn't. Don't worry about it. I was wrong. And he's like, yeah, you're sure about that? And he's like, no, it's not his style. It's a whole different thing. And if he got rid of me now, there'd be no legacy to overcome. And Alfred points out, like, legacies, inheritances. That seems like it's pretty much everything nowadays. And then Julia shows back up and is like, Dad, get back in bed. So she gets on the phone with Alfred, shares the news about the shipping manifest, and Batman's like, my God, get the family. We got to get all this hands. Organize a citywide surveillance. And she's like, bro, focus on flying your plane and get back home. I know what to do. I've been at this long enough. So we then go to Scarecrow, who is loading up drones to disperse fear toxin from Gotham Cathedral, and then in comes Batwing, who's like, this is my sky, Scarecrow. So he takes out Scarecrow. We see Clayface is performing a scene as Batman. He has kidnapped a man who I guess is an actor to play Joker, and he doesn't do a good enough Joker laugh. So Clayface is like, I'm a method actor and you're taking me out of the scene. You better do better than that. Make me a star or I'm going to kill you. And we see from the rafters Red Robin is watching. Apparently he's getting into a little bit of a tiff with Bluebird because Bluebird was like, oh, I could have found this out much faster than you did. So he jumps in and he's ready to stop Clayface from kidnapping this guy some more. We then see Julia's like, hey, Bluebird, you were actually over taking care of whoever ordered all of the weird 1950s pinup sort of stuff. That's probably Poison Ivy, right? That's like right up her alley. And as Bluebird turns the corner, she's like, nope. Turns out it's Mr. Freeze. He's frozen an entire family and is trying to just like remake that. He's trying to have a normal life. And we see like a frozen dog and a frozen like son, and like they're all posed in very natural ways out in the backyard. So then we get to Batgirl, and of course Batgirl, she gets the manifest that says a bunch of doll heads and funhouse mirrors and all that stuff. And she's like, it's Joker's daughter, and it's at the same place where I had to go through Killing Joke. And Julia's like, ooh, that's a little insensitive. I didn't realize that. Do you want to trade? I can get someone to trade with you. And she's like, nah, I got this. I'm putting a punchline on this joke, as they go into the funhouse area. And then we get Red Hood, and Red Hood follows something. I don't even know what, but he ends up at this bar that's a super rundown, seedy joint. And as he is making his way inside, he's like, yeah, no, this place is right up my alley. I love it in here. And then all of a sudden the guy gets on the intercom and he's like, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a cage match for you tonight. 6 of Spain's greatest luchadors are here to fight, but they are fighting up against not just one man, but the John Henry special. They're fighting the Machine, Bane. And Bane comes out in like a full mech suit, which just seems so anti-Bane to me, but you know, whatever. We also get a power outage at Wayne. I guess they're underneath Arkham Manor, so it's in the Batcave. And immediately Hush is like, hey, Alfred, I've got something for you, as Julia is clearly knocked off to the side. So then we go to the Narrows, where Stephanie and what's his name, Cullen, the brother of Bluebird, are hanging out, and Cullen's like, man, crazy stuff going on out there, right? And Stephanie's like, you have no idea. This is nothing. And he's like, I don't think it's nothing. I think no matter what your definition of something is, this is something. And she's like, no, you don't understand. It's all just a cover. It's all just a ploy. You guys don't see what's really going on here. I need to talk to somebody who's even more powerful than superheroes. I need to talk to Vicky Vale. Because, you know, journalism. So then we go back to Alfred. He's now tied up in front of the Bat computer. Hush is out of his cage. And he's like, hey, Alfred, just wanted to let you wake up in time to give your daughter a bon voyage. And he points over to what I can only assume is a escape pod. And he's got Julia tied to it. And Julia's like, get over here, mummy boy. I'll punch your lights out. What, are you afraid of me? And as she's yelling at him, he presses the button and she goes zooming up out of the cave into the waters of Gotham Bay above, and she surfaces to see the entirety of Gotham burning. Meanwhile, Alfred is basically saying, like, okay, now that that's out of the way, it's time to take care of business here. And he puts a hood over Alfred, as someone else comes into the cave, a shadowy figure. We don't see who, seemingly whoever's in charge of everything. And he's like, hey, Alfred, remember that you would always watch me and Bruce play, and you'd chastise Bruce because he was never good with playing with other kids? Well, I suppose I never understood only child syndrome back then, but now I'm going to make sure that he knows how to share his toys. And he presses an emergency override button, which crashes the bat plane in Gotham, and oh my god, is Batman dead? I'm sure he is. Definitely the end of Batman in issue 47 of Batman Journal. So yeah. Not quite my favorite issue. Mainly because I don't care what the Arkhamites are doing. Let me rephrase that. I think there's potential for them to have had cool stories with each of these Arkhamites, but I think that time has passed. We are 5 issues to the end now. We've got all this bigger stuff that we need to set up, pay off in terms of who is actually all behind this and Batman figuring it out. I don't think we have time to give 5 different people interesting stories. So I think what it's probably going to be is next issue, everyone's going to be fighting against these given Arkhamites, and then that's it. They're going to wrap it up, and that's all it's going to be, is that the family has saved the day, but ultimately something slipped through the fingers, and that's what Batman has to deal with. If you wanted to do something cool with these guys, they should have been doing something cool throughout the entire story. Instead, it feels like they were piecemealed, kind of doing something throughout, and then they were all brought together within the past 10 issues and just given this little pat on the butt and said, okay, go out, do something crazy, go on, have a nice day. It just, I don't know, it's a bit weak for me. I think I would much more rather focus on the larger mystery here and saying, what is Batman missing? Who is the person who's actually behind all this? And just do that, really lay into that plot instead of coming up with this little last second, oh, but the stakes are never higher. Clearly we're taking care of that. If you're putting Batwing on one, if you're putting Bluebird in one of them, clearly it's going to be taken care of. So yeah, it's probably just going to be a 6.5 for me. I wasn't super into this issue, but it just needs a refocusing in the last few issues. I'm hoping that can stick the landing. Future's End number 43, written by Azarel Lemire, Jurgens Giffen, art by Andy McDonald. So this issue opens up with Brainiac still taking over the city, doing his whole thing, and Superman is down in a crater being tended to by Lois, and Lois is like, oh my god, is it really you, Superman? Are you cool? New York needs you, I need you. And he wakes up, he's like, Lois? Oh, hey, what's going on? And he sits up, he's like, oh, is Brainiac still a thing? It's like, yeah, he's still there, he put a dome, it stopped lifting up all of a sudden. I assume that's you. And he's like, nope, wasn't me. So then she starts going into reporter mode and it's like, where have you been all these years? You're really alive. What's happening? And he's like, I was recovering. And she's like, oh, from what? Am I allowed to ask that? Are you good now? And he's like, the war, everything that happened, the expectations that were put on me, that's what I was recovering from. And she's like, oh, you mean the Justice League? They're all fighting. Batman too. And he's like, don't say that name. And she's like, oh, right. Yeah, you guys had a thing, didn't you? So he looks at a Brainiac just being like, well, I gotta go stop him. We cut over to Brainiac, whose computer is telling him something happened with the satellite up there, bro. There's nothing, we can't do anything. And Brainiac's like, okay, can you give me give me a status, what's going on there? And it's that the terraforming spheres are all still in place. They are primed for maximum output power, but there's just no satellite up there. And he's like, all right, fair enough. We're not going to be able to beam it up and shrink it down, so let's go with the manual route. And so it lifts up a pair of handlebars, and he initiates manual separation as he starts lifting up the city by hand. We cut through Times Square as Terry McGinnis is flying through. All of the screens have Brother Eye's logo on it and saying, New Yorkers, stand united. I will protect you. I am, diversity and all that makes you strong. So we go over to Batman, who's on Mr. Terrific's computer. And Batman's asking Brother Eye, damage assessment. How bad is it? It's like, Manhattan's screwed, man. Everything sucks. And Mr. Terrific's just looking out the window all dreamily, oh, Batman, I've seen the future. we have power, and despite the fact New York is separate, isn't that a miracle? He's like, you have a backup generator, man. Can you focus for a minute? So he's like, oh, but we are in the presence of the extraordinary. I've spoken with God, an intellect outside myself that is drawn to me because of my intellect. Do you understand what I've done, what this means to all of us? And Batman's just like, no, I really don't. So we see Tim Drake and Plastique making their way through the halls of Terrific Tech where everyone's dead. And as they start making their way through, Tim Drake is like, shut up. Just stop talking. I think I hear something. Something's going on here. And as they're moving their way through the halls, they think that whatever it is that killed all these people is still stalking them. And then all of a sudden, they are stopped by Key and Coil. If you remember, Key and Coil got a job at security at Terrific Tech like 30 issues ago. So we cut back to Superman talking to Lois, and he's like, there, I gotta go fight Brainiac. It's not over. I gotta go. And she's like, you don't look so good, Superman. And he's like, doesn't matter. And everyone's like, yeah, you go, Superman, kick his ass. So we go back to Plastique, who's talking to King Coil, and it's just like, you got hired here? That's crazy. Also, by the way, this is Robin. And it's like, what? Robin? Crazy. Coil's throwing up because he's connected to Earth's magnetism. That's his thing. And now that they are separated from Earth, he doesn't feel so good, Mr. Stark. We then see the robot version of Plastique is creeping around corners, ready to attack. So Plastique is talking to Coil and just like catching up on everything that's happened in the meantime. Same thing with Coil and Robin just being like, oh yeah, I'm Robin. Hi. I didn't want to be known as such, but yes, that's who I am. And then we just get a single panel glimpse of the fact that Joker, Batman, Cyborg from the future was not killed last issue. It's still alive. God damn it. So we then get this point where it's, okay, we've got to prevent the future. That's what's got to happen. And Key's like, nah, it's not going to happen. And it's like, what do you mean? That's what we got to do. And he points out the window like, nah, look at, we don't have a future. We are being bottled. This is hell. We're going to die. And Tim Drake's just like, not with that attitude. And I, for the life of me, I'm trying to parse this any other way than what was intended. Key says, well, I didn't trust Mick G from Jump Street, so here at the end ain't a good time to start. I saw what he was up to. And then he looks over at Plastique and says, it's all about Dick with her. And then Tim says, yo, she's never met him. To which everyone's like, what? And he's like, Dick. And Plastique's like, who's Dick? So I have to assume they're just talking about how Plastique's a horn dog. Right? Am I like, there's no other, whatever. So at that point, they're all sitting there like, look, I don't know if I believe in time travel, but you're seeing like it all makes sense here. And then all of a sudden, Robot Plastique attacks. Coil and Plastique get put behind a safety wall as Robot Plastique scans Tim Drake to see whether or not he can be destroyed. And it's like, yes, destruction with no consequence. And Tim's like, no consequence? What the hell? And then in through the window comes Terry McGinnis. Tries to attack. Immediately, he gets slashed by Plastique and is knocked down on the ground. It starts yelling, eradicate, eradicate. Plastique, the good one, blasts through the safety door, attacks the Robot Plastique. Robot Plastique starts seizing out because it's like, must destroy to preserve self, but cannot destroy because self. And so Plastique uses her powers to explode it, but they both go tumbling out the window as it happens. Terry's like, oh my god, my girlfriend! And he runs over. Good Plastique managed to hold on to the window railing, so he pulls her up. They embrace, share a kiss. Meanwhile, Brainiac's still driving the ship. He's trying to pick it up by the handles, and it says like, oh, anchor locks are now in place. And Brainiac's like, why are we stopping? And it's like, oh, well, because we're going to damage this more than you would prefer if we keep going. And he's like, screw it. I just want to get this over with. Allow for extra damages. And it's like, cool, bye. So now he pilots the city up and out. And as Mr. Terrific watches on the screen, Batman's like, seems like you did a pretty crap job there, Mr. Terrific. And Terrific sits down and he's like, I need some help. So that's that. 5 more issues. Nothing happens. It's just not like you. Not only does nothing happen, like effectively, like actually, we just reestablished that Coil and Key are characters. But not only does nothing happen in this issue, we undid something that I thought happened. I thought Joker, Batman, Cyborg was actually dead. They sold that in the last issue. But they undid that. So, like, we've made negative progress here. And I don't know if it's for stalling purposes. I don't know if, like, they always knew they were going to have this issue here, or, like, the story beats just didn't line up properly, but this just feels like an absolute waste of an issue. It's not that everything in it is bad. On top of that, like, the dick joke was strange, but it wasn't, like, a horrible attempt at humor. I feel like we're at the end, and yet this book is doing everything in its power to be like, okay, but like slow it down a little bit. We were given 48 issues, and by God, we're going to use every last goddamn page. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a. Honestly, it's like a 5.5. I can't even say the 6. The 6 implies that like I'm fine with it, and I'm just not. It just doesn't quite get there. I will say it's above the 5, but that's the most it's got going for it. Earth 2 World's End, number 21, written by Bennett, Johnson, and Wilson, art by everybody who can hold a pencil at DC. So this issue picks up in Adam's Haven, where Flash and Hawkgirl are just not okay. Everything is going to hell, the technology is invading the Haven, and they are fighting it back as best they can, but ultimately they are fighting a losing battle. We see in the Stratosphere, Power Girl, Superman, and Red Tornado are all up, ready to fight the satellites. And they make a rousing speech where Power Girl's just like, remember Krypton, Val? The mountains, the skies. We have to fight for this world because we couldn't defend our last one. We can't let it die because we stopped trying. So they go out and they're ready to start punching through satellites and stuff like that. But Val makes the point of like, this is dumb because we're just fighting an endless horde. Like, it's an endless wave. This conflict has accomplished nothing. They aren't meant to stop us, all of these hordes. They're meant to keep us busy. There has to be something else that we can do. So then we go to off the east coast of England, where there's a giant ship that apparently Green Arrow owns, or I should say Oliver Queen, as we find out soon. It took a blood sample, recognized Helena Wayne was there, and it's like, Helena Wayne, you may enter. So staircase opens up, they make their way down. They get sealed in, and Batman's like, yeah, I don't know if we got an exit plan, but we better hope that this is a friendly. So as they make their way deeper in, they come across a man dressed in red with an arrow, saying like, oh, sorry for the mess. I would have cleaned up if you were visitors. By the way, you're not Bruce Wayne. And he's like, no, I'm not, but we don't have to do this. And he sets down the arrow. It's Oliver Queen. And he's like, oh, Helena, I'd still recognize you. So he says, yeah, no, I've heard there was a new Batman. Didn't realize you were old. You guys want coffee? I brewed it yesterday. And basically, the long and short of this scene is that Bruce Wayne designed this outpost in case Apocalypse came back. And Oliver was left to keep it safe because only like a few of the smartest people in the world can know where it is and like know how to use it and all that. And Terry Sloan figured he should be one of them, but Oliver didn't trust Terry, so now he has to stay here and defend it to make sure Terry doesn't get into it. And he's like, okay, well, whatever this is, it's what your father built in order to be a base of operations to help people rebuild. And Helena's like, rebuild what? The weapon? The weapon to take out Apocalypse? And Oliver's like, no, it's not a weapon. This is not a weapon. And he pulls up a little box, opens it up, and inside are like 2 microchips. And he's like, they're programs. They interface with this station. One has the DNA of every plant, animal, organism on the planet to ever live, and the other contains all of our world's history, culture, and language. This is everything we are and everything we were, all in one thing. And it is how humanity will continue, how we will survive. So we then go back over to Adam's Haven, where Sato and everyone else is like, we're screwed. We're doomed. This isn't going to work. We got to evacuate. Hey, what are the escape ships doing? And they look at the screen, and the escape ships are all just taking off. And they're like, someone call the pilots? Pilots aren't answering. And it's like, okay, well, we're doubly screwed then. Hey, Hawkgirl, Flash, we're all going to die. Just want to make it clear here, if we can't find a way off the planet, we're all going to die. And then all of a sudden, the Lieutenant Aya or something like that, her eyes start glowing, and she turns around to Sato and just like, do not try to retrieve the ships that I have commandeered. They are being put to good use to evacuate the planet. Any attempts will be met with lethal psychic force. And immediately she's like, who are you? She's like, I am Brainwave, savior of the Earth. So then we go over to beneath Adam's Haven, where all the people are being let out by Brainwave. And Wildcat and Dick Grayson are just not affected for whatever reason, but they're still following the Horde. And Obsidian is leading them. He's taking them to wherever the sun is. So as they're making their way down, all of a sudden there's this huge psychic energy attack that affects both Dick and Wildcat. Wildcat's forced to rest for a minute. He's like, that's too much for me. I gotta, you go on, find your son. And as they reach the end of the Horde, as they go down the end of the tunnel, standing there is Brainwave going like, good citizens, I am going to save you. Here is ships that will take you off the planets. No need to panic. You just must trust in Brainwave. So back up, we go to the multiversal escape ship, the Endurance, that Terry Sloan just said that now he's in charge of. And Sandman is immediately just like, God damn it, Terry Sloan, you ruined everything. You keep on ruining everything. And Terry's like, everything I did is for the greater good. And look, Mr. Miracle is never going to allow you to harm me because, unlike all of you, he recognizes there is no escape unless you've got me. And Mr. Miracle's like, look, just light up the engines, man. Like, let's go down. Let's get some survivors. Let's do what we can. And Sandman punches Terry in the face, just being like, no, screw this guy. Why did he do it? Why did you do it, man? And he's like, this is a feeder universe. I protected my universe in order to get them to come here to feed this one. Like, that planet, Apocalypse, it's gotta eat. Man, it's gonna eat a planet, and it ain't gonna be mine. So yes, I saved my universe, I locked horns with a god, and I won. And Sandman's like, you're a monster. And he's like, yeah, whatever, hero monster, I saved my own world, and I'm willing to help you save what's left of yours. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of warning lights come up on screen, and Mr. Terrific's just like, do something, man. If we don't save this ship, like, that's all the survivors are gone. And Terry just smiles, and he's like, oh, it's already done. But trust me, it's all part of my plan, as the ship explodes, seemingly with all of them in it. I don't know how dying helps, but, whatever. Okay, I don't even know what to say about this series anymore. It's not abysmal. Like, it's still making the smallest amount of forward progress, but like, I think I said probably about 10 issues ago at this point, like, this book is misery porn. This book is 100% devoted to how do we take away every last bit of hope from all of these people all the time. And like, every time there is the smallest little victory, it doesn't even get to last for like a page before all of a sudden it's like, and now everything's gone. Like, even in this book, it's like, Terry Sloan's going to help you, and it's the worst possible way, but like, he will do it. And then everything's blowing up. Like, I don't know. It's just, from a writing perspective, we're going through 26 issues where there is not a single hopeful moment. That's not true. There are a few. There are a few that actually manage to hold on for at least one issue, and then they are immediately taken away after that one issue. So like, I'm tired of it. I know we're approaching the end. We've only got like 5 issues left, but like, you didn't need to go through all this. You could have had little wins, tiny wins. Make it so that the death of the planet's inevitable, but you still have moments of hope and like the ability to be able to move on instead of everything constantly being in vain all the time. So I'm giving this one a 6. But it's only just barely scratching by that. And like, if we don't at least spend 2 or 3 of the last 5 issues with more hope than despair, I'm just going to be upset. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this February 25th, 2015. And like I said at the beginning, I'm going to keep the ending here a little short as well. Like I said, just nothing to say. It's been a very blasé week. You know what I've actually started doing? I've started downloading games onto my phone. I know, right? Like, that sucks. Have you... I remember back to a golden period of mobile gaming, and it was right before they realized nobody will buy a game for money, so we need to load it to the gills with ads. But I was a person who would buy a game for money, and I miss those times. I miss the times where I don't have to watch the same goddamn, oh, check out this game. It's the hardest puzzle game you'll ever play. You gotta draw a line between two dots. Oh, God, I hate those so much. Anyway, that might just be a me problem, but, like, I feel like I can get a little bit of an amen from the audience on there. Anyway, comics next week. What do we got? We're entering March. Not only that, we are entering month number 40 of this show, which is to say the actual New 52, labeled on the books as saying the New 52, is coming to a close. We are approaching the end, but I will reminisce more on that next time. So what do we got? We've got, in no particular order, Detective Comics, Grayson, Harley Quinn, Green Lantern, Aquaman and the Others, Earth 2, Green Arrow, Justice League 3000, Infinity Man and the Forever People, Lobo, Swamp Thing, and our 3 weeklies, Eternal, Future's End, and Swamp Thing. I like Swamp Thing. I want it to be double in the week Swamp Thing. Future's End and World's End is what I meant to say. So yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for me. If you have any comments that you would like to add on any of the comics I covered this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up on the comments down beneath this YouTube video if you're watching the YouTube version, or if you're listening to the audio version. We have a number of social media platforms that you can find us on. We have a subreddit, a Patreon, a Discord, a Patreon, a Blue Sky, a Patreon. The Blue Sky is not actually set up yet, but I'm in talks with it. I think it'll probably be set up like by the end of the week. But then again, I don't know. It's whenever I get around to it. Like I said, I've got mobile games to play. So yeah, that's it for me. I really don't have anything else to say. Be sure to tune in next week. Thank you very much for listening this week. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.